Grelling, Nelson Paradox. It starts simple. Some words describe themselves. Some words don't. Take the word short. It's a short word. Take the word English. It's an English word. These are called autological words, words that have the property they describe. Now take long. Long is not a long word. Confusing isn't confusing, unless you're overthinking it. Those are heterological words. Words that don't match what they describe. Seems harmless, right? Now here's the trap. Is the word heterological itself heterological? If it is, if heterological is a word that doesn't describe itself, then it actually does describe itself, because being heterological means not describing itself. But if it isn't, if heterological does describe itself, then it shouldn't, because heterological words don't describe themselves. Either way, it flips itself inside out. And if you're feeling your brain do a little backflip right now, good. That's just a warm-up. This paradox shows that even plain, everyday language, the stuff we think is safe, can loop itself into pure nonsense just by asking the wrong question at the right time. And it sneaks up on you. You go from words describing words to what even is meaning anymore in about 5 seconds. Ship of Theseus. Let's say there's a ship, an old, beautiful ship owned by a man named Theseus. We'll call it the Ship of Theseus. Over the years, its wooden planks start to rot. So one by one, each piece is replaced. First a mast, then a sail, then a beam, until eventually every single part has been swapped out. Now here's the question. Is it still the same ship? It looks the same. It sails the same. It has the same name, the same purpose, the same place in history, but none of the original material is left. And now it gets worse. Imagine someone kept all the old parts, the ones that were removed, and used them to build a second ship, piece by piece. When it's done, they say, "This is the original ship of Theseus, all original parts, fully restored." So now you have 2 ships, one made entirely of replacements, but with continuous history, one made of the original parts, but rebuilt from scratch. Which one is the real ship of Theseus? This is the paradox. And it doesn't just apply to ships, it applies to you. Because your body replaces itself all the time. Old cells die, new ones grow. Your skin, your blood, your brain, all of it changes over time. And yet, you still feel like you. So what exactly makes something or someone the same over time? Is it the physical matter, the pattern, the continuity, the memory? Or is identity just an illusion we project to feel consistent? This paradox shows up in science, psychology, AI, even law, because the question isn't really about ships. It's about what survives when everything changes, and whether continuity is something you can touch, or just something you tell yourself. Birthday Paradox. Here's a question. How many people do you need in a room before there's a 50% chance that 2 of them share the same birthday? Think about it. There are 365 days in a year, so you'd expect the number to be maybe 100, or maybe even 18. The actual answer, 23. That's it. Get just 23 people together, and there's about a 50-50 chance that at least 2 of them have the same birthday. And no, it's not a trick question. It's not about twins, it's just math. This is the birthday paradox, one of the clearest examples of how human intuition absolutely fails at probability. So why does this happen? Because we're asking the wrong question. Most people think, what's the chance that someone matches my birthday? That's rare, 1 in 365. But the actual question is, what's the chance that any 2 people in the room share a birthday? And there are a lot of possible pairs in a group. In a group of 23, there are 253 unique pairs of people. Each pair is a chance for a match. It's not about one birthday. It's about all the ways people can match each other. And as the group grows, those pairings explode, meaning the odds of a match rise much faster than you'd expect. By 50 people, the chance is over 97%. By 70, it's practically guaranteed. This paradox is often used in cryptography, especially in attacks where collisions, two different inputs producing the same output, are more likely than you'd think. But even outside tech, it's just a solid reminder our brains aren't built for probability, especially when the real question is, how many ways can things go wrong? Russell's Paradox. Let's say you're building a library. You decide to organize it with extreme precision. Books about animals go in the animal section. Books about history go in the history section. And here's where things get weird. You create a special section, a shelf for books that do not mention themselves. Sounds strange, right? But hang with me. Imagine some books are totally normal. They never talk about themselves. A Brief History of Time doesn't say this book is called A Brief History of Time, so it qualifies. You put it on the special shelf. But now, here's the paradox. What about a book titled A List of All Books That Do Not Mention Themselves? Should it go on that shelf? If the book does mention itself, then it shouldn't be on the shelf. But if it doesn't mention itself, then it fits the criteria, so it should be on the shelf. Either way, you're stuck. No matter how you decide, the result contradicts the rule. This is the essence of Russell's paradox, proposed by philosopher and mathematician Bertrand Russell in 1901. But it wasn't about books, it was about sets. In set theory, a set is just a collection of things. For example, the set of all cats, or the set of all things that are not cats. Now imagine a set that contains all sets that do not contain themselves. Let's call it set R. The question is, does R contain itself? If it does, then by definition it shouldn't, because it only includes sets that don't contain themselves. But if it doesn't, then it fits the rule, so it should include itself. And just like that, logic breaks. At the time, this was a massive blow to the foundations of mathematics. Russell had basically found a bug in the very system that math was built on, a hidden contradiction that made certain kinds of reasoning collapse in on themselves. To fix it, mathematicians had to rewrite the rules. They created new kinds of set theory, with extra layers, restrictions, and safeguards, just to avoid this type of self-referencing loop. Because if your system allows a paradox like this, anything can happen. You could prove that 1 equals 2, or that unicorns exist, just by twisting the logic. So Russell's paradox isn't just a philosophical puzzle. It's a reminder that even in the clean world of math, things can get messy if you're not careful about how you define what belongs and what doesn't. Pardos Paradox. Imagine you're stuck playing two games. Game A, you flip a slightly rigged coin. It's biased just enough that on average, you lose money over time. Game B, another coin flip game. But this one's even more complicated. Depending on how much money you already have, the odds change. And guess what? It's also a losing game. No matter how you slice it, if you stick to one game, you lose. But now, here's the trick. Alternate the games. Play game A a few times, then switch to game B, then back to A. Randomize it. Mix it up. Suddenly, you start winning. Wait, what? How can combining two losing strategies turn into a winning one? That's Pardos Paradox, discovered by physicist Juan Parrondo in the 1990s. It's not gambling magic. It's mathematical structure. Each losing game creates little imbalances, tiny waves of probability that favor losing. But when you combine them, those imbalances interfere with each other, and weirdly, they can push you toward winning instead. Think of it like two wrong turns that somehow land you at the right destination. And it's not just coins and games. Pardos Paradox shows up in financial strategies, biological evolution, systems where alternating between bad states creates surprising stability. It teaches a weird but powerful lesson. Sometimes mixing two bad options is better than sticking to one. And sometimes winning isn't about finding the perfect path. It's about leaning into chaos, just enough to break out of a trap. Barber Paradox. It starts with a guy, a barber. He lives in a town with some very specific rules about shaving. In this town, every man must be clean-shaven. No exceptions. But here's the twist. The barber shaves all the men who do not shave themselves. Let that sink in for a second. If you're a man in town and you don't shave yourself, the barber handles it for you. But if you do shave yourself, the barber doesn't touch you. So here's the question. Who shaves the barber? Think about it. If the barber shaves himself, then according to the rule, he can't, because he only shaves people who don't shave themselves. But if he doesn't shave himself, then by the town's rule, he must shave himself because he shaves anyone who doesn't shave themselves. It's a trap. There's no logical way out. The barber can't exist without breaking the rules of his own job. Now you might be thinking, okay, that's cute, but what's the point? Well, this isn't just a story about facial hair. This paradox was actually invented to explain a deeper problem in mathematics and logic, the same one we saw with Russell's paradox. In fact, this is Russell's paradox in disguise. Instead of talking about abstract sets that contain themselves, we're just talking about a guy with a razor. But the logic is exactly the same. Once you allow self-reference without limits, systems collapse. It's like a legal system that has a law against enforcing itself, or a company policy that says, only break the rules if you follow the rules. And suddenly something as ordinary as shaving turns into a philosophical time bomb. The Nocebo Paradox. You've heard of the placebo effect, right? Take a sugar pill, believe it's medicine, and sometimes your body actually heals itself. The mind triggers real biological changes. But here's the darker mirror image. Take a sugar pill, believe it's poison, and your body can actually get sick, even though there's nothing wrong with the pill. That's the nocebo effect, and it leads straight into the Nocebo Paradox. It asks, how can something harmless, something that objectively shouldn't hurt you, still harm you just because you expect it to? Here's what happens. Your mind expects pain. Your body responds with real symptoms: increased pain sensitivity, nausea, dizziness, fatigue, even measurable chemical changes in the brain. It's not imaginary. It's not all in your head in the dismissive sense. It's physical, real, documented in clinical studies. And it gets worse. The more you fear an outcome, the more your body can amplify and fulfill that fear, creating a feedback loop between belief and biology. Which leads to the paradox. If simply warning someone about a side effect can cause the side effect, how do you ethically give medical advice at all? Should doctors tell you about every possible risk, if telling you increases the chance you'll suffer it? Or should they withhold information to protect you and violate your right to know? The Nocebo Paradox reveals something unsettling. Your mind doesn't just interpret reality, it helps create it. And sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do to yourself is believe too strongly that you're in danger. The two-dog paradox. Imagine you're standing at a fork in the road. One path leads to freedom, the other to certain death. In front of you are two dogs. One always tells the truth. The other always lies. You can ask only one question to one dog, and you must figure out the safe path. But here's the catch. You don't know which dog is the liar. You don't know which path is which. And you get only one shot. So what do you ask? Here's the clever move. You point to one path, doesn't matter which, and ask, if I ask the other dog whether this path leads to freedom, what would they say? Then, no matter what the dog answers, you do the opposite. Why? Let's break it down. If you ask the truth-telling dog, he'll tell you what the liar would say, which is a lie. So you can trust the opposite. If you ask the lying dog, he'll lie about what the truthful dog would say. Again, you can trust the opposite. In both cases, asking about the other dog forces the lie to reveal itself. No matter who you ask, truth-teller or liar, the trick guarantees you a safe choice. The two-dog paradox feels simple at first, but underneath it shows a deep truth about logic. When you can't trust individuals, you can still trust the structure of the system itself. And sometimes, beating the trap isn't about finding the honest voice. It's about asking the right question. The Hooded Man Paradox. You know your brother is in town. You're told he'll be passing by soon. Later, you see a man wearing a hood walking past you. You don't recognize him. You don't react. You just see a stranger in a hood. Here's the problem. You know your brother is nearby. You see the hooded man. The hooded man is your brother. So how can it be true that you know your brother is here? You see your brother right in front of you. And yet, you don't know the man you're seeing. That's the hooded man paradox, created by the ancient Greek philosopher Eubulides, the same mind behind the liar paradox and the sorite heap. It exposes a deep flaw in how we think about knowledge and identity. Knowing that your brother is here feels obvious. Recognizing your brother when you see him should be obvious too. But identity isn't always direct. Recognition isn't automatic. You can know something in one way, logically, abstractly, and still fail to connect that knowledge to what's right in front of your eyes. And it raises brutal questions. What does it really mean to know someone? Is seeing enough? Is believing enough? Because if you can see your own brother and not recognize him, if you can know something logically and still fail to feel it, then how much of what you know is just fragile illusions? Glued together by assumptions, the hooded man paradox shows sometimes the hardest truths to see are standing right in front of you, hidden only by the way you think you're seeing. Zenos Paradox. Imagine you're watching two rows of soldiers marching past each other. One row is moving left. The other is moving right. Both are moving at the same speed. You watch closely, and you notice something strange. Each soldier in row A passes each soldier in row B twice as fast as they pass the stationary objects on the side of the road. But wait, if they're moving at the same speed and their speeds are constant, how can the time between encounters be shorter when they pass each other than when they pass stationary things? That's Zenos Paradox, one of Zeno's lesser-known attacks on the concept of motion. It highlights something unsettling. Relative motion isn't just about how fast things move. It's also about how frames of reference collide. In modern terms, we know it's because when two objects move toward each other, their relative velocity is the sum of their speeds. But in Zeno's time, 2,400 years ago, this made motion itself seem impossible. Because if motion leads to contradictions, where speed depends on who's watching, then maybe motion isn't real at all. Maybe what we call movement is just an illusion, a trick of the senses stitched together moment by moment. The Stadium Paradox forces a sharp realization. When you trust your common sense about space and time, you're already making invisible assumptions. The unexpected hanging paradox. A judge tells a prisoner, "You will be hanged at noon on one weekday next week. The execution will be a surprise. You won't know the day until the hangman comes for you." The prisoner thinks hard. First he reasons, "It can't happen on Friday, because if I'm still alive by Thursday night, then it must happen on Friday, and it wouldn't be a surprise anymore." So he crosses out Friday. Then he thinks if Friday's out, then Thursday can't happen either, because if I'm alive by Wednesday night, and I know Friday's impossible, then Thursday's the only choice left, and again, it wouldn't be a surprise. He crosses out Thursday, and by the same logic, he eliminates Wednesday, Tuesday, and Monday. By Sunday night, he's confident there's no way the execution can happen at all. But then, on Wednesday, the guards come. They take him by surprise, and the execution happens, exactly as promised. That's the unexpected hanging paradox. It shows how logical reasoning, applied perfectly, can still lead you wrong, because the reasoning itself changes the conditions it's trying to predict. The prisoner's logic destroyed the surprise in theory, but in practice, it set him up to be even more surprised when reality didn't match his expectations. The unexpected hanging forces a simple, brutal realization. Sometimes the very act of trying to predict the future is what guarantees you'll be wrong. The Crocodile Paradox. Let's say your child gets grabbed by a crocodile. The crocodile, somehow, speaks. He says, "I will return your child if you can correctly predict what I'm going to do next." You panic. You think fast. And you say, "You're going to return my child." Now the crocodile is stuck. If he gives your child back, then your prediction was correct, and he's following his promise. But if he doesn't give your child back, then your prediction was wrong. And according to his own rule, he doesn't have to return the child anyway. But here's the real twist. If he intended to return the child, your prediction is correct. If he intended not to return the child, your prediction being wrong justifies keeping the child. Either way, his actions seem to break or fulfill the promise at the same time. That's the Crocodile Paradox. It's a trap where prediction and outcome are tangled together so tightly that no consistent logical answer exists. And it shows. When promises depend on future predictions, logic can collapse in on itself, leaving no clean way out. The Liar Paradox. Let's start simple. Here's a sentence. This sentence is false. Okay, so is it true? If it's true, then what it says must be the case, which means it's false. But wait, if it's false, then the sentence is lying, and that means it's true. Congratulations, you've just met the Liar Paradox, one of the oldest and sneakiest logical paradoxes in history. It sounds like a word game, but it actually messes with the very foundations of truth and logic. If a sentence can't be classified as either true or false, the entire idea of logic, the stuff behind computers, math, even everyday thinking starts to wobble. And no, this isn't just some language trick. This paradox shows up in real problems, like Russell's paradox in math, and even in programming errors where a system keeps flipping its answer forever. Some versions are more sneaky, like what if someone says, "Everything I say is a lie." Well, is that sentence also a lie? And don't worry, we'll cover those tangled statements later. For now, just remember this. The Liar Paradox is the ultimate verbal prank. It doesn't break logic, it exposes where logic hasn't finished patching its own holes. Curry's Paradox. Let me introduce you to a sentence so dangerous, it can prove literally anything, including that Santa Claus is real. If this sentence is true, then Santa Claus exists. That's it. That's the whole thing. Now, let's walk through this slowly. You're staring at a sentence. It says, if this sentence is true, then Santa Claus exists. Now ask yourself, what if the sentence is true? Well, then the condition it lays out must also be true, which means Santa Claus exists. Okay, but what if the sentence is false? Here's the trap. In logic, if the first part of an if-then statement is false, the whole thing is still considered true by default. Which means, whether it's true or false, we've just used logic to prove that Santa Claus exists. That's Curry's paradox. It's a type of self-referential logic bomb, just like the Liar Paradox, but instead of saying something is false, it says something dangerous will happen if it's true. That structure allows it to bypass normal logical filters and force absurd conclusions. And no, this isn't just a language trick. This kind of structure appears in formal logic, in mathematical systems, and in type theory and computer science. If a system allows this kind of circular reasoning without limits, it becomes what mathematicians call inconsistent. You can prove anything, and once you can prove anything, nothing means anything. In programming terms, it's like a backdoor, a function that calls itself and rewrites reality with no oversight. In philosophy, it's a warning. Even clean logical statements can carry hidden traps, especially when they start referencing themselves. Curry's paradox is named after Haskell Curry, not the food, and it's not the only paradox like this. But it's one of the most elegant because it looks so harmless. If this sentence is true, then Santa Claus exists. No circular loops, no lies, just a little conditional statement that breaks the entire machine. Buridan's ass. There's a donkey, he's hungry, and he's standing between two piles of hay, one on his left, one on his right. Both are exactly the same. Same size, same smell, same distance. Absolutely identical. So the donkey thinks, if I go left, I miss the right. If I go right, I miss the left, and I have no reason to choose one over the other. So, he doesn't. He stands there, frozen, unable to decide, until eventually he starves. That's Buridan's ass, a thought experiment named after philosopher Jean Buridan, though he didn't actually invent it. It's a paradox of rational decision-making. The donkey behaves logically, too logically. Faced with two equal choices, he finds no reason to choose either, and pays the price for perfect thinking. Now, obviously, real donkeys don't behave like this. But humans, we do it all the time. You freeze at a restaurant menu. You stall on two job offers. You hesitate between paths, equal on paper, different in risk, and sometimes you wait so long that life chooses for you. The paradox exposes a flaw in the idea that rationality alone is enough to guide action. Because sometimes choice requires a leap, not of logic, but of will. And here's the deeper fear. If your decision-making is purely logical, and two options are truly equal, you'll never act. You'll just stall. So Buridan's ass reminds us, even a bad choice is sometimes better than no choice at all, because the world doesn't wait. Richard's Paradox. Let's mess with numbers for a minute. Suppose you sit down with a big list. You decide to list every real number that can be described in English, like the square root of 2. The first number greater than 0 with 2 decimal places. The number of seconds in an hour. All of those can be described with a simple English sentence. Now imagine you create a new number, defined as the smallest positive number not describable in under 13 words. Sounds fine until you realize you just described it in less than 13 words. Congratulations. You broke the system. That's Richard's paradox. The moment you try to define the undefinable, you accidentally define it. And just like that, you trap yourself in a contradiction. This isn't just wordplay. It exposes something deeper. Language itself has loopholes. When you use vague ideas like describable or countable without strict boundaries, you leave a crack open, and paradoxes slip right through. Mathematicians hated this, because if you allow things like Richard's paradox, you can't trust simple ideas like we can describe all numbers. You realize that some numbers exist, but they can't be captured by any English sentence without causing a logical collapse. It's like setting up a dictionary and discovering that some words inside it define themselves into existence. Barber Paradox. It starts with a simple idea, describing numbers with words. Suppose you're playing a game. The goal: describe numbers in English as shortly as possible. For example, the number 5. That's 3 words. The number 100. 4 words. The first number greater than 1,000,000. 7 words. Now imagine someone says this: the smallest positive integer not describable in under 12 words. Sounds okay at first, but then you realize you just described it in less than 12 words, which is impossible by its own definition. That's the Barber Paradox. It's like trying to write down the number that you supposedly can't write down and accidentally writing it anyway. To make it even clearer, imagine you're at a fair and they're giving a prize for the least famous person nobody's ever heard of. But the moment you name that person, they're famous. You can't win. The act of describing them changes the reality. Same with numbers. The act of pointing out the number you can't describe easily ends up describing it easily. Now, if this reminds you of Richard's paradox, good catch. They sound similar, but they're pulling different tricks. Richard's paradox is about building a complete list of all describable numbers and then using that list to describe a number that supposedly isn't on it. The contradiction comes from the existence of the list itself. Barry's paradox, on the other hand, isn't about a list. It's about compression. The number of words used. It says this number can't be described briefly, and then does describe it briefly. One's a problem of content, the other is a problem of length. And here's why mathematicians really cared. If natural language lets you create paradoxes like this, you can't rely on common sense for things like defining sets or counting numbers. You need stricter formal definitions, otherwise language will tie itself into knots. Barry's paradox is sneaky because it feels like you're just playing with words. but it opens a crack wide enough to break basic assumptions about math, size, and even meaning. And all it took was a sentence you thought was too long. Quins Paradox. It looks like a normal sentence, but it's not. Here it is. Yields falsehood when preceded by its quotation. Yields falsehood when preceded by its quotation. That's the sentence. Read it again. It doesn't say this sentence. It doesn't talk about itself directly, but it's still referring to itself, just through indirection. And that's what makes Quins Paradox different. It's a self-referential loop without the obvious clues. Most paradoxes throw this sentence as false right in your face. Quins Paradox sneaks around the side. It builds a paradox using language structure alone. No pronouns, no shortcuts. It's like giving someone a map with no labels and watching them walk in circles anyway. This kind of structure is a problem in logic and programming, because it means you don't need obvious self-reference to break things. You can create contradiction just by designing a sentence cleverly enough. And the worst part, it looks clean. It looks normal, but underneath it's broken. And Quins Paradox was designed to show that even when you take away the usual tricks, that this sentence is false stuff, paradox still finds a way in. You don't need mirrors to make recursion. You just need language. And one well-placed quote. Catch-22. Imagine you're a soldier in a war. You're terrified. The missions are insane, the odds are suicidal, and you want out. You go to the officer and say, "I'm crazy, I shouldn't be flying missions." The officer smiles and says, "Exactly. Wanting to avoid dangerous missions proves you're sane, and only sane people have to keep flying." That's Catch-22, a situation where the rules create a perfect loop. If you try to escape, the very act of trying proves you can't escape. The term comes from Joseph Heller's famous novel, where it described the insane bureaucracy of war, but the idea is bigger than that. You've probably seen Catch-22s everywhere. Jobs that require experience you can't get until you have the job. Institutions where challenging authority automatically makes you suspicious. Social rules where defending yourself makes you guilty by default. The trap is self-reinforcing. The more you fight it, the stronger it holds you. You can't win because the system defines winning and losing in a way that guarantees your failure. Catch-22 teaches something brutal. It's not just bad rules that trap people. It's bad rules that hide inside a logic that sounds reasonable until you're already stuck. And when the system itself defines sanity, guilt, success, permission, you can scream, protest, explain, beg. But the answer is always exactly. That's why you're not getting out. Monty Hall problem. You're on a game show. There are 3 doors. Behind one is a car. Behind the other 2, goats. You pick a door. Say door Shay 1. Then the host Monty Hall, who knows what's behind every door, opens another door. Let's say door Shay 3 and reveals a goat. Now he gives you a choice. Stick with your original pick or switch to the other unopened door. What do? Most people say it doesn't matter. 2 doors, 1 car, 50-50, right? Nope, wrong. The smart move. Always switch. If you switch, you win 2/3 of the time. If you stay, you only win 1/3 of the time. And yes, that feels impossible, because your brain wants to treat the final 2 doors as equal. But they're not. Here's why. When you made your first choice, there was a 1 in 3 chance you picked the car and a 2 in 3 chance you picked a goat. Monty, who knows where the car is, always opens a door with a goat. He's not guessing, he's giving you information. So if your original choice was a goat, which it probably was, switching wins only if you somehow guessed right the first time. That 1 in 3 chance does switching lose. It's counterintuitive, it feels wrong. Even smart people like actual PhDs argued about this when it was first published in Parade magazine. But the math checks out, and if you don't believe it, try it yourself. Play the game 100 times. Count your wins. It's always better to switch. The Monty Hall problem isn't just about doors and goats. It's about how humans misunderstand probability, especially when new information enters the mix. We think we're rational, but deep down, we're just guessing and hoping the goat doesn't show up. The two envelopes paradox. You're handed two envelopes. You're told that one envelope contains twice as much money as the other. You pick one. Doesn't matter which. Now before you open it, you're given a choice. Do you want to switch? Let's think it through. Suppose the envelope in your hand contains $100. Then the other envelope could be either $50 or $200. If it's $50, you lose $50 by switching. If it's $200, you gain $100. There's a 50% chance you lose $50 and a 50% chance you gain $100. Add those together, and your average outcome is a gain of $25. Seems like a good deal, so you switch. But now you're holding the new envelope, and guess what? The same logic applies again. If this one has $100, the other might have $50 or $25. Expected value still $25 if you switch. So you switch back, and back, and back. You're stuck in an infinite loop of switching, forever chasing the better deal, even when there isn't one. That's the two envelopes paradox. What's going wrong? The mistake is, in the logic, we assume the other envelope always has a 50% chance of being either half or double what we're holding. But that's not always valid, because once you open one envelope and assign a value, the distribution of the other envelope's value isn't symmetrical. If there's a fixed highest or lowest amount in the system, the 50-50 logic breaks, but your brain and the math keep nudging you to switch. It's a trap, a clean, mathematical trap. And the weirdest part, even when you know it's a trap, it still feels like switching is the right thing to do. Because sometimes, the paradox isn't in the envelopes. It's in the way we think about value. The St. Petersburg Paradox. You're offered a game. It costs money to play, but the rules are simple. You flip a coin. If it lands heads on the first flip, you win $2. If it lands heads on the second flip, you win $4. Third flip heads, $8. Fourth flip heads, $8. Fourth flip heads, $8. $16, and so on. Every time you flip, the potential payout doubles, but the game only ends when you finally hit tails. Then you win nothing. Now here's the question. How much would you pay to play this game? Let's do the math. There's a 50% chance you win $2, a 25% chance you win $4, a 12.5% chance you win $8, Zaubrein, and so on. If you add all those up, 1 divided by 2 times 2, plus 1 divided by 4 times 4, plus 1 divided by 8 times 8. It just keeps going. Mathematically, the expected payout of the game is infinite. That's right, infinity dollars. So logically, you should be willing to pay any amount to play. $100, even your life savings. After all, the expected value is off the charts. But in real life, no one would ever pay more than $10. Most people wouldn't even pay $5. Why? Because something doesn't feel right, and you're not wrong. This is the St. Petersburg Paradox, a problem first posed in the 18th century that reveals a crack between mathematical theory and human decision-making. Technically, the math says the game is worth an infinite amount, but human intuition says, I'm not risking my money on a game that might give me $2 and end instantly. Economists have used this paradox to explore risk aversion, utility theory, and why we value money non-linearly. To most people, a guaranteed $10 is more appealing than a gamble with infinite upside and a huge chance of walking away with almost nothing. So the paradox isn't just in the math. It's in how we value outcomes, not as abstract numbers, but as real things that matter to us. And apparently, infinity isn't worth as much as it sounds. The Dunning-Kruger effect. Picture someone who's just started learning about a topic. They barely scratched the surface, maybe read one article, watched a couple of videos, but suddenly they're convinced they know everything. They explain things loudly, correct other people, act like experts. Meanwhile, real experts, people who've spent years studying the subject, often hesitate. They know how complex it is. They know what they don't know. That's the Dunning-Kruger effect, discovered by psychologists David Dunning and Justin Krueger. It's the idea that people with low ability at a task tend to overestimate their skill, while people with high ability often underestimate themselves. It's not just arrogance, it's blindness. To know how good you are at something, you need enough skill to recognize what good even looks like. And if you don't have that skill yet, you have no idea how much you're missing. So you assume you're great. Meanwhile, real experts, burdened by their knowledge, see all the nuances, all the gaps, all the ways they could be wrong. It creates a dangerous twist. The loudest voices often come from the least informed people. You see it in debates, internet arguments, workplace meetings, public policy. And the Dunning-Kruger effect isn't just about other people. It happens to you too. Whenever you start something new, there's a moment where you think, I've got this figured out. And usually, you don't. The Dunning-Kruger effect reminds us, real wisdom isn't about how loudly you can explain something. It's about knowing how much you still don't understand. Simpsons Paradox. Let's say you're comparing two treatments. In a medical trial, treatment A cures 90 out of 100 people. Treatment B only cures 75 out of 100. Seems obvious, right? Treatment A is better, but then you break the data down by gender. Among men, treatment A cures 40 out of 50. Treatment B cures 45 out of 50. Among women, treatment A cures 50 out of 50. Treatment B cures 30 out of 50. Now B looks better for men, and A looks better for women. But wait, overall, A still had 90 cures, and B only had 75, so which is actually better? That's Simpsons Paradox. It's what happens when trends that appear in separate groups reverse when those groups are combined. And it doesn't just happen with medicine. It happens in hiring stats, school admissions, sports, voting data, basically anywhere numbers are sliced into categories. The reason it happens, it's all about hidden variables, things like group sizes or proportions that distort the overall result. In our example, maybe more women took treatment A, and women were more likely to be cured overall, skewing the total, so what you're seeing isn't a mistake. It's a statistical illusion caused by aggregation, combining data without considering the structure underneath. The danger? You can make completely opposite conclusions depending on how you group the data, and that's the scary part. Because most people trust the top-line numbers, the totals, the headlines. But Simpsons Paradox is a reminder that sometimes, the more you zoom out, the less you see. And when numbers lie, they don't always do it loudly. Benfords Law Paradox. You'd think that in a bunch of real-world numbers, prices, populations, tax returns, invoices, the first digit would be random. Like if you grab 1,000 numbers from the wild, you'd expect a pretty even spread of starting digits. 1 through 9. Roughly equal, right? Nope. In reality, the number 1 shows up as the first digit way more often than 2 or 3 or 9. In fact, 1 appears around 30% of the time, while 9 only shows up about 5%. This is Benford's Law. And once you see it, it's everywhere. Street addresses, electricity bills, country populations, financial reports, even the lengths of rivers. The paradox is simple. Why do numbers starting with 1 dominate the real world? It's not random. It's not a glitch. It turns out, when numbers span multiple orders of magnitude, from tiny to huge, they naturally lean towards starting with lower digits. Here's a rough way to think about it. To go from 1 to 2, you double. To go from 8 to 9, that's barely a 12% increase. So in naturally growing systems, numbers spend more time in the lower ranges before crossing the threshold into the next first digit. The result is this weird, reliable pattern where 1 dominates, followed by 2, then 3, with each number dropping off predictably. And here's the fun part. Benford's Law is used to catch fraud. If someone's cooking the books, making up numbers, they tend to choose digits randomly. But real data doesn't work like that. So investigators run the numbers through Benford's formula, and if the first digit distribution looks off, that's a red flag. So this isn't just a statistical quirk. It's a truth hidden in plain sight, a fingerprint of authenticity in the chaos of data. And if you're thinking, wait, my brain doesn't like this, yeah, that's the correct response. Zenos Dichotomy Paradox. You want to walk across a room. Simple, right? But first, before you reach the other side, you have to get halfway there, then halfway again, and again. Every time you move forward, you have to cross half of the remaining distance. So what's the problem? There's always another halfway point, and if you have to cross an infinite number of halfway points, how do you ever get to the end? That's Zenos Dichotomy Paradox. It says that motion, any motion, is impossible, because you'd need to complete an infinite number of steps to get anywhere at all. You might be thinking, okay, but I just walked across the room like 2 minutes ago. Exactly. This paradox doesn't break reality. It breaks the way we think about infinity. Because yes, there are infinitely many halfway points, but each step is smaller than the last. Half, then a quarter, then an eighth, then a 16th. And if you add up all those distances, they converge to a finite number. That's what calculus eventually proved, over 2,000 years later. So yes, motion is real. But Zenos paradox shows that when you divide things into infinitely many parts, you can end up with a picture that looks impossible, even though it's not. It's not that the math is wrong. It's that intuition struggles with infinity. And Zeno knew it. He wasn't trying to stop people from walking. He was trying to expose cracks in the way we define space, time, and change. And guess what? People are still arguing about it. Zenos Achilles and the tortoise. Achilles is fast. The tortoise is that they're about to race. But to be fair, the tortoise gets a head start. Let's say Achilles lets him begin 100 meters ahead. Now the race begins. Achilles takes off, and very quickly he reaches the point where the tortoise started. But by the time he gets there, even if it's just a second later, the tortoise has moved a little farther, maybe just a meter. Achilles keeps running and quickly reaches that point. But again, the tortoise has moved ahead. No matter how small the distance, the tortoise is always just a bit ahead. So the question is, does Achilles ever catch up? The common sense answer is obviously yes. He's faster. He'll overtake the tortoise in seconds. But Zeno's logic says otherwise. Because in order to catch up, Achilles has to first reach where the tortoise was. Then he has to reach where the tortoise moved next, and the next place, and the next. Each time, the distance gets smaller, but there's always one more point to reach, an infinite number of steps. So even though each step takes less and less time, the list of steps is endless. And if the steps never end, how can he ever pass the tortoise? That's the paradox. Just like in the dichotomy paradox, the math problem here is about infinity. There are infinite points Achilles must cross, but just like before, those points don't take infinite time. They shrink. The total distance converges. So in reality, Achilles passes the tortoise easily. But Zenos paradox isn't about denying reality. It's about exposing the limits of logic when you try to chop motion into infinite little steps. It's one of those problems where the math is right, the logic is right, and yet they seem to disagree. And for Zeno, that was the point. The infinite monkey theorem. Imagine a monkey. Now give it a typewriter. Let it sit there and randomly press keys, just smashing away with no idea what it's doing. Now imagine doing that, not once, but forever. According to probability theory, if the monkey types for an infinite amount of time, it will eventually type every possible combination of letters. That includes the complete works of Shakespeare, every book ever written, this script you're listening to, and even a perfect copy of this exact chapter, word for word. That's the infinite monkey theorem. It's not saying it's likely, it's saying that given infinite time, even the most improbable outcome becomes not just possible, but guaranteed. Because infinity doesn't care about odds. No matter how rare something is, even a 1 in a trillion chance, if you try forever, it has to happen eventually. That's what breaks people's brains. Because we're used to thinking in terms of high chance or low chance. But when you throw infinity into the mix, the whole system changes. It's the same reason people say if you shuffled a deck of cards infinitely, you'd eventually get it back in the same order, and every possible order, including one where all the cards are sorted by color, suit, and number. Sounds impossible, right? It's not. It's just infinity being infinity. Now, real monkeys, they don't care about probability. Put one in front of a keyboard and it'll probably rip the keys off in 10 seconds. But the theorem isn't about monkeys. It's about randomness and how over infinite time, chaos contains everything: order, nonsense, poetry, truth. It's the kind of paradox that makes you stop and realize if randomness can create Shakespeare, maybe order isn't as rare as we thought. Maybe it's hiding in the noise. Boral Kogora Paradox. Okay, get ready. This one is sneaky. It starts with a really innocent question. What's the chance that a random point on a ball lands in a certain spot? Imagine this. You've got a smooth, perfect ball, like a globe. Now you pick a point on it completely at random. Could be anywhere, on the top, the side, the bottom. So far, so good. Now let's say I ask you, what's the chance that your random point lands somewhere near the equator? Like, within a strip that's 10 degrees above and 10 degrees below the equator. You might say, it's a slice of the sphere, seems fair to ask. And yes, you can calculate that. It'll be a certain percentage of the total surface area. But now, here's where the weird part kicks in. What if I ask the same question but I describe the sphere differently? See, there are lots of ways to describe a point on a ball. You can use latitude and longitude, like on a globe. Or you can use height from the bottom up, kind of like measuring how far up a point is from the South Pole. Or you could measure the angle between the point and the vertical axis. All of those ways work, and they all describe the same point. But here's the paradox. Depending on which method you use to define randomness, you get different answers to the same question. Same ball, same region, same pick a point at random. Different answers. Let me give you an example to make this clearer. Let's say you're throwing darts at a world globe, blindfolded, and you want to know what's the chance my dart lands in the tropics, near the equator. Now there are two ways I might describe random dart throws. Method A. You spin the globe and stab at it randomly. Your finger is equally likely to land anywhere on the surface. This is surface area-based randomness, like every square inch of the globe has an equal chance. Method B. Instead, imagine I just randomly pick a latitude, like a number from -90 to 90 degrees. Then I spin the globe and pick a random longitude. That sounds fair, right? But it's not, because the globe is fatter near the equator and narrower near the poles. So when you pick a latitude uniformly, you actually oversample the poles and undersample the equator, even though your numbers look random. So if I ask what's the chance your point lands near the equator? Method A gives you one answer. Method B gives you a different answer. Both are random, but they lead to different probabilities, and that's the paradox. So what's the big deal? In math, we like to think that probability is objective, that it's a clean number that exists independent of how you ask. But the Boral Paradox shows, if you don't carefully define how you're picking things at random, your answers can change, even when the question doesn't. In other words, what's the probability of X is incomplete without also asking according to which measure. This matters big time in physics, where probabilities over surfaces affect predictions. Machine learning, where you randomly initialize weights. Bayesian statistics, where assumptions about randomness can completely change your conclusions. It's not just a math curiosity, it's a warning. If you change your perspective, you might change your result, even if you don't change the data. So yeah, sometimes math is watching how you ask the question more than what you're asking. The Grandfather Paradox. Time travel always sounds cool, until you realize it might break reality. Here's the setup. You go back in time. let's say a few decades. And for some reason, let's not ask why, you decide to prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother. Maybe you just bump into him and push him off course. Or maybe you go full science fiction and stop him permanently. The result? Your parent is never born. Which means you are never born. But if you're never born, how did you travel back in time in the first place? That's the grandfather paradox. It's not really about grandfathers, it's about causality. The idea that effects have causes, and causes lead to effects. If you travel back and change the past, you risk undoing the very thing that made you exist. And that breaks the timeline. This paradox has been used in everything from philosophy to science fiction because it creates a logical dead end. You succeed and erase yourself from existence, which means you couldn't have gone back in time to do it, or you fail. And somehow the timeline protects itself. You were never meant to change anything. Some theories try to fix this. They say maybe time doesn't let you change key events. Or maybe there are multiple timelines, and the moment you interfere, you split off into an alternate reality. But those are just ideas. No one knows how time actually behaves, because we've never been able to travel backward and test it. The grandfather paradox reminds us that even if time travel were possible, it might come with rules we don't understand or consequences we can't undo. And once you start changing the past, you're not just messing with history, you're messing with the reason you exist at all. Bootstrap Paradox. Imagine this. You're a time traveler. You go back in time, and while you're there, you hand a copy of Shakespeare's plays to Shakespeare. He reads them, copies them down, and becomes famous for writing them. Centuries later, you read Shakespeare, travel back in time, and give him the plays again. Here's the question, who actually wrote them? Because now the plays have no origin. You got them from Shakespeare, but he got them from you. That's the Bootstrap Paradox. It's what happens when an object, a piece of information, or even a person gets stuck in a causal loop, traveling through time in a way where it creates itself. It's called bootstrap because of the old phrase pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, doing something impossible with no starting point. This paradox shows up all the time in sci-fi. A musician hears a melody from a time traveler and writes it down. That time traveler only knows the melody because it became famous. No one actually composed it, it just exists, passed through the loop. It's different from the grandfather paradox. That one breaks the timeline. This one sort of recycles it. It creates a stable loop, but one that feels impossible. Because if something exists, purely because it was copied from itself, where did it originally come from? In physics, this raises serious questions about time travel, causality, and entropy, because normally, things have causes. They decay, they degrade. But in a bootstrap loop, the information stays perfect, bouncing back and forth in time with no origin and no end. So if you ever find a book, a song, or an invention, and no one knows who made it, maybe it was you. Maybe it always was. Maybe it never was. Predestination Paradox. You go back in time to stop something from happening. That's the mission. That's the goal. But as you move through the past, changing events, making choices, you realize something strange. Everything you do is the reason it happened in the first place. That's the Predestination Paradox. It's not a contradiction like the grandfather paradox. It's worse, because here, the time loop holds together perfectly. But at the cost of your freedom, let's walk through it. Imagine a fire breaks out in a building. You survive, but it changes your life. Years later, you gain access to time travel and decide, I'm going to go back and stop that fire. You arrive. You see the moment you act. But something goes wrong. Your attempt to stop the fire causes it, accidentally. Maybe you knock over the lantern, or distract the person who would have caught it. And that's the twist. Your future actions caused your own past. You didn't prevent the disaster. You completed it. Now step back and look at the timeline. Everything fits, there's no contradiction, but your choice wasn't a choice. It was always part of the story. This paradox appears everywhere in fiction. A detective investigates a mysterious death and becomes the cause. A hero goes back to stop a villain and becomes the villain. A child is orphaned, grows up, time travels, and unknowingly becomes their own parent. In every case, the past and the future are locked together. And here's the part that messes with your head. Even if you know what's going to happen, you can't change it, because trying to stop it is what makes it happen. That's the real horror of the Predestination Paradox. Not that time is broken, but that it isn't. Everything is exactly where it's supposed to be, including you. Teletransportation Paradox. You step into a machine. It scans your entire body, every atom, every molecule, every synapse in your brain. Then it sends that data to Mars, or the Moon, or somewhere else and rebuilds you perfectly. Same memories, same personality, same face. But in order to do that, it destroys your original body. Vaporized, gone. Just atoms. And now the question, is the person on the other side still you? That's the teletransportation paradox. Philosopher Derek Parfit posed it like this. If we can copy a person atom for atom, what makes the copy any less real than the original? And if the copy is perfect, then does it matter that the original was destroyed? On the surface, the answer feels simple. Yes, that's still me. But let's push it. What if the machine malfunctions and doesn't destroy the original? Now there are two of you, both identical, both claiming to be the original. So, which one is really you? Or here's another version. What if we slow down the destruction process? Instead of vaporizing you instantly, we erase you one atom at a time, while copying and transmitting those atoms to the new location. At what point do you die? Halfway through? At the start? Not at all? This paradox messes with your sense of identity, because it suggests that what you call you, yourself, might just be a pattern, not a substance. If your mind can be transferred and the original body can be discarded, does that mean your body was never essential? Or does it mean the moment you step into the machine, you've agreed to be replaced by someone who thinks they're you, but isn't? And the worst part? You'll never know, because the new version walks out, smiling, confident, believing it's you, and the old you might be gone forever. Or maybe it never mattered. The Polchinski Paradox. Imagine you have a time machine, not a flashy DeLorean, just a wormhole that lets you send objects into the past. Sounds wild, but stay with me. Now take a billiard ball and roll it toward the wormhole. It enters the wormhole and comes out a few seconds earlier, right behind itself. Now let's say the ball bumps into its earlier self. Not a big collision, just enough to knock it slightly off course. That tiny bump means the original ball no longer enters the wormhole in the exact same way. So when it comes out in the past, it doesn't hit itself the same way. Maybe it misses entirely or hits harder. And that's the problem. If the ball hits itself too hard, it prevents itself from entering the wormhole at all. But if it doesn't enter the wormhole, it wasn't there to hit itself. And now we're stuck. This is the Polchinski Paradox, a time travel scenario that creates a direct physical contradiction. It's like the Grandfather Paradox, but stripped of humans and emotions, just raw physics. And here's the fun part. Joseph Polchinski, the physicist who proposed it, didn't do it as a joke. He wanted to challenge real theories of time travel, especially ones involving closed time like curves from general relativity. The response? Some physicists, like Kip Thorne and his team, actually ran simulations. They found that the paradox could be avoided, but only under very specific conditions. Instead of a head-on collision, the billiard ball might tap itself just enough to send it into the wormhole on a slightly different path, a kind of self-consistent loop. In other words, the universe allows time travel, but only if everything that happens is perfectly self-consistent. No contradictions, no violations, no paradoxes. So if you ever invent a time machine, the laws of physics might still stop you from messing up the past, not by force, just by design. Ethics of time travel. Let's say you have a time machine. It works. You can go anywhere in the past. No paradoxes, no weird physics problems. Now what? Do you save lives, stop disasters, undo your own mistakes, or do you just watch? That's the ethics of time travel. The paradox that doesn't break logic or physics, but breaks your sense of right and wrong. Because every change you make in the past alters the future, not just for you, for everyone. Say you go back and stop a war. Sounds good. But that war shaped world history, politics, technology, migrations, even birth rates. Stop it. And you might erase entire generations of people who were born as a result of it. Or let's say you stop a tragic accident. You save one life, but maybe that life goes on to cause harm or change events in ways you didn't expect. The problem is simple. You can never change just one thing. Time is a web. Pull one thread, and the whole pattern shifts. Now here's where it gets darker. What if the right thing to do is nothing? What if the past is awful? Wars, injustice, suffering. But changing it creates more problems than it solves. Are you responsible for what you allow to happen, or only for what you actively do? This is why so many time travel stories feel tragic, because the power to change time comes with total uncertainty. And that's a moral burden no one's really ready for. And here's the cruel twist. Even if you try to make things better, you'll never know the full consequences. The world might look better, or maybe you just created a different kind of damage you can't see. So yeah, time travel could be amazing. But it also forces you to ask one terrifying question. What if changing the past doesn't fix anything? It just moves the pain around. The doomsday argument. Let's say you're born into a world where humans have existed for thousands of generations. Now ask yourself, where am I in that timeline? Am I part of the early generations, somewhere in the middle, or near the end? This is the question behind the doomsday argument, a probabilistic paradox that suggests humanity might be closer to its end than we'd like to think. Here's how it works. Imagine humanity is going to produce a total of 100 billion people across its entire history. You, right now, are person number 117 billion-ish, give or take, depending on estimates. So, what are the odds that you were born this early, if humanity's future stretches on for millions of years? Statistically, it would be strange to find yourself this close to the beginning of a much larger story. Like opening a 10,000-page book and finding your name on page 3. The doomsday argument flips this around and says, if you assume your position is random, then it's actually more likely that you're somewhere near the middle of humanity's total lifespan, not the beginning, which would mean humanity isn't going to last millions of years. It might already be halfway done. Of course, this is just probability, not prophecy. It doesn't predict how the world will end. It just plays the odds based on where you happen to find yourself in the timeline. And yeah, there are counter-arguments. Some say we can't treat human birth order as random. Others point out that survival isn't a lottery, it's a choice. But the core idea is deeply uncomfortable. Your mere existence gives you statistical clues about how much longer humanity might last. Not because you know the future, but because you exist at all. And in a universe full of uncertainty, sometimes the scariest predictions come not from data, but from where you happen to be standing. The paradox of the timeless choice. We think of decisions as things that happen in time. First there's uncertainty, then a moment of choice, then an outcome. But what if that's just how it feels, not how it actually works? Here's the paradox. In physics, especially in some interpretations of quantum mechanics or block universe theory, time isn't a flowing river, it's a frozen structure. Everything that has ever happened, and ever will happen, is already laid out, like frames in a film reel. From that perspective, there's no such thing as the present. No moving moment of now, just the entire timeline, start to finish, existing all at once. So when you make a choice, say whether to turn left or right, what's actually happening? Are you choosing? Or are you just discovering the version of the timeline where you always turned left? In other words, did you make a decision at that moment? Or has that decision always existed, etched into the structure of space-time? That's the paradox of the timeless choice. If the universe is fixed, if the past, present, and future are all equally real, then free will becomes hard to define. And if that's true, what does making a choice even mean? This isn't just philosophy. It touches real physics. In some interpretations of quantum mechanics, like the block universe or eternalism, your choices don't change the future. They're just part of a timeline that already exists. The moment you think I'm deciding, that moment was already part of the script. So you still feel like you're choosing. But there may never have been a moment when you weren't going to do exactly what you just did. And that's the twist. What feels like freedom may just be your awareness catching up with your fate. Schrödinger's cat. There's a cat. It's inside a sealed box. You can't see it. You can't hear it. You don't know what's happening inside. Inside the box is a strange setup. A tiny bit of radioactive material, a Geiger counter to detect whether it decays, a vial of poison, and a hammer. If the radioactive atom decays, just one, the Geiger counter detects it, the hammer smashes the vial, and the cat dies. If it doesn't decay, the poison isn't released. The cat lives. Simple. Not quite. According to quantum mechanics, the atom is in a superposition, a state where it has both decayed and not decayed, which means the poison has both been released and not released, which means the cat is both dead and alive. At the same time, until you open the box and look. Only then, in that moment, does the wave function collapse, and the cat becomes either alive or dead. That's Schrödinger's cat, a thought experiment created by physicist Erwin Schrödinger in 1935 to show how weird quantum mechanics gets when you apply it to real objects. Now, Schrödinger didn't actually believe the cat was both alive and dead. He made up the story to mock the Copenhagen interpretation, the idea that a quantum system doesn't pick a state until it's observed. But here's the thing. That interpretation stuck, and ever since, we've had to ask, is the cat really in both states until we look? Or is that just our way of describing incomplete information? Some physicists say yes, superposition is real. Others say no, the cat is always alive or dead. We just don't know until we open the box. Still others go full multiverse and say, both happen, one in each universe. So Schrödinger's cat isn't about cats. It's about the moment when quantum uncertainty collides with reality. And it asks a terrifying question. What if the universe doesn't commit to reality until you do? Wigner's friend. Let's go back to the box. There's still a cat inside. Cat. Still the radioactive atom. Still the poison. But now, we add something new. A person. Let's say your friend is in the sealed room with the box. They can open it. They can look inside. They can see whether the cat is alive or dead. You, meanwhile, are standing outside the room. The door is shut. The room is soundproof. You have no idea what happened inside. From your point of view, until the door opens, the entire room, your friend, the cat, the box, is in superposition. A blend of every possible outcome. From your friend's point of view, the uncertainty is gone. They saw the cat, they know the outcome. For them, the quantum wave function has collapsed, but for you, it hasn't. That's the paradox. This is Wigner's friend, named after physicist Eugene Wigner. He proposed it to ask, when does quantum measurement really happen? Is it when the event occurs? When someone observes it, or when you observe them? Here's the twist. Both perspectives are valid. According to quantum mechanics, your friend has a definite experience. But from the outside, they are still part of an entangled system that hasn't resolved. So whose version of reality is correct? This paradox leads to wild possibilities. One version says the wave function never collapses. Everyone just becomes entangled with the outcomes, but no reality is ever selected. Another version, the many worlds interpretation, says both outcomes happen. The moment your friend observes the cat, the universe splits in one, they saw it alive. In the other, dead. A third says collapse only happens when conscious awareness is involved, whatever that means. Wigner's friend isn't just a thought experiment, it's now being tested in real-world quantum labs with photons and measurements and observers that disagree. And the results? Still unclear, still unsettling. Because the deeper you go into quantum reality, the more it seems like truth depends on where you're standing and what you've seen. EPR Paradox. Two particles are created together. Same system, same moment, same origin. Then they fly apart. Miles, light years. It doesn't matter. You keep one. Your lab partner takes the other to the opposite side of the galaxy. Now, you measure your particle. It could be spin, could be polarization. Doesn't matter. Just a quantum property that isn't set until it's observed. You check yours. And in that instant, your particle snaps into place. But so does the other one. No signal, no delay, no communication, just instant alignment. Your measurement determines what the other one will be, even across vast distances. That's entanglement. And this is the EPR paradox, proposed in 1935 by Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen. They didn't like it. In fact, they created this paradox to attack quantum mechanics, to show that something had to be missing. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. Because how can one particle affect another instantly, across space, without violating the speed of light? They argued either quantum mechanics is incomplete, there must be hidden variables controlling everything, or the universe is connected in a way that breaks locality. The idea that objects can only influence things near them. The quantum world said, yeah, we'll take option 2, and decades later, experiments confirmed it. Entangled particles really do behave this way. Measure one, the other is instantly affected. No hidden variables, no trick, just reality. Here's what makes it worse. It doesn't let you send information faster than light. You can't use it to cheat, time, or teleport data. But the correlation, the perfect instant correlation, is real. So the EPR paradox didn't destroy quantum mechanics. It made it stronger. It revealed that at the deepest level, the universe isn't made of separate things. It's entangled, linked, non-local. And whatever distance means, it doesn't mean what we thought. Black hole information paradox. Imagine you throw something into a black hole. A phone, a notebook, a star. Doesn't matter. Whatever goes in, disappears. That's what black holes do. Their gravity is so strong, not even light escapes. Once something crosses the event horizon, it's gone. No way out, no way back. But here's the problem. In quantum mechanics, information is never supposed to be lost. It can change. It can get scrambled. But deep down, the universe is reversible. If you had perfect knowledge, you could rewind time and get everything back. Black holes break that rule. Because when something falls in, and the black hole eventually evaporates, which we now know they do, slowly, through a process called Hawking radiation, the information doesn't come back out. Hawking radiation is random. It's like steam rising off a boiling pot. You don't get your object back. You get pure noise. So here's the paradox. Where does the information go? If it's truly gone, then quantum mechanics is wrong. If it's not gone, then something inside the black hole must preserve it or somehow send it back. And that's where physics started to break. For decades, this tore a hole in the field, pun intended. On one side, general relativity says black holes destroy everything, including information. On the other, quantum mechanics says that's impossible. Information must be conserved, but they can't both be right. Over the years, physicists have proposed ideas. Maybe the information escapes through the Hawking radiation, encoded in subtle ways. Maybe it's stored on the surface of the black hole, like a hologram. Maybe it's preserved in a remnant after evaporation. Or maybe information isn't what we thought it was. Stephen Hawking himself changed his position later in life, suggesting that information might leak out after all. But the mechanism is still debated. The black hole information paradox isn't just about astrophysics, it's about truth. Can something truly vanish from the universe? Or is the universe playing a trick, hiding the information so well? We can't tell it's still there. Either way, it's a reminder. The most extreme places in the universe don't just warp space and time. They warp everything we believe about reality. Firewall Paradox. Let's say you're falling into a black hole. You've accepted your fate. You pass the event horizon, that invisible boundary. No turning back. But strangely, you feel nothing. According to general relativity, crossing the event horizon should be uneventful. Just another point in space. No explosions. No force field. No warning. You fall in smoothly until you hit the singularity at the center, where physics breaks down. That was the story. Until physicists took the black hole information paradox seriously, and things got ugly. If information escapes a black hole through Hawking radiation, as many now believe, then the radiation must be entangled with what's inside the black hole. But there's a problem. Quantum mechanics doesn't allow double entanglement. Hawking radiation can't be entangled with the stuff that fell in, and with the earlier radiation that already left. That's called the monogamy of entanglement. And it's strict, so something has to give. To keep quantum theory consistent, physicists proposed a radical idea, the firewall. It says that right at the event horizon, the place you were supposed to float through peacefully, there's actually a searing wall of high-energy particles. Not a metaphor, not an illusion, a literal, violent, quantum firestorm. You hit it the moment you try to cross the horizon, and you're obliterated. That's the firewall paradox. It says maybe black holes don't have smooth edges, maybe they're not gateways, they're walls, and maybe the laws of physics rewrite themselves at the boundary just to preserve information. But here's the catch. If firewalls exist, relativity is wrong. Because relativity says you shouldn't notice anything at the horizon. No drama, no death. Just space, continuing as usual. But if relativity is right, then quantum mechanics must break down to preserve that calm crossing. You can't have both. This paradox leaves us with a terrible choice. Keep relativity and sacrifice unitarity, the rule that information is never lost. Or keep quantum theory and accept that black holes aren't what we thought. They're death walls. As of now, no one knows the answer, but one thing is certain. Black holes aren't just the end of matter. They might be the end of agreement between the two greatest theories in physics. Quantum suicide. You sit in a chair. There's a device next to you, a quantum gun, connected to a particle detector. It checks the spin of a single atom, up or down. Each time you press the button, it makes a measurement. If it reads up, the gun clicks, empty. If it reads down, it fires. One trigger pull, 50-50 chance. Live or die. This is the setup for the quantum suicide paradox. And it asks a chilling question. What does it feel like to die in a multiverse? Here's the theory. According to the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, every possible outcome actually happens in a separate branching universe. So when you press the trigger, two worlds split. In one, the gun fires. You die. In the other, the gun clicks. You survive. But here's the twist. You never experience the world in which you die. Your conscious experience continues in the branch where you lived, every time. So from your point of view, sitting in the chair, the gun never fires. You press the trigger over and over. The world branches, and the version of you who survives keeps going. Always. This is quantum immortality. The idea that you, the observer, will always find yourself in the universe where you're still alive, no matter how unlikely it becomes. But here's the catch. From the outside, it looks like a normal quantum experiment. From inside, it becomes a nightmare loop of survival. You might be battered, broken, alone, but never dead. Because death can't be experienced, and the branches where you survive never stop. Of course, this is just a thought experiment. No physicist actually recommends testing it. But it raises the ultimate paradox. If reality splits every time a quantum event occurs, and if consciousness can only exist in the branches where it continues, can you ever truly experience your own end? Or are you trapped? Not in time, but in probability. Quantum Zeno effect. You've heard the phrase, "a watched pot never boils." Turns out, quantum mechanics agrees. Let's say you have a radioactive atom, unstable, ready to decay. You leave it alone, and eventually, it'll decay into something else. But if you check on it constantly, every millisecond, something strange happens. It stops decaying. That's the quantum Zeno effect. Named after Zeno of LA, the same guy who said motion was impossible. In this version, though, the impossibility isn't about moving, it's about changing. Here's how it works. In quantum mechanics, unstable systems evolve over time, but the act of measurement collapses the wave function. It freezes the system in its current state. So if you measure the atom once, it might decay. But if you measure it rapidly and repeatedly, the system gets reset each time, stuck in a kind of quantum Groundhog Day. The more you observe it, the harder it becomes for the system to evolve. So yeah, a watched quantum system really doesn't change. This has been observed in the lab. Physicists have slowed down atomic transitions, even frozen them completely, just by increasing how often they measured the system. It's like reality wants to change, but every time you look, it locks up and plays dead. Now here's the weird part. This only works at the quantum level, with fragile systems governed by uncertainty and probability. In everyday life, your boiling water doesn't care whether you're watching or not. But down at the atomic scale, reality responds to attention, and it reminds us, in quantum physics, observation isn't passive, it's participation. Just looking at something too often might be enough to stop it from happening at all. Delayed choice quantum eraser. Let's go back to the double slit experiment. Fire single photons, tiny particles of light, at a wall with two slits. If no one's watching, the photons form an interference pattern on the screen behind it, like waves interfering with themselves. Each photon seems to go through both slits at once, but the moment you observe which slit it goes through, the pattern disappears. Now they behave like particles. No interference, just two bands. So far, so weird. But now comes the twist. In 1999, physicists took this even further with the delayed choice quantum eraser. Here's the idea. You fire a photon at the slits, but instead of hitting the detector directly, the photon is split in two. One part goes to the main detector, where it either shows interference or not. The other part is delayed, sent down another path, where you decide later whether or not to gather which path information. And here's what they found. If you choose to erase the path information later, the interference pattern reappears in the earlier data. If you choose to keep the path info, the interference is gone. That choice is made after the photon hit the screen. Let that sink in. Your future decision about how to observe the photon, whether or not to erase its history, seems to change the outcome of something that already happened. This is the delayed choice quantum eraser paradox. It suggests that reality doesn't commit to a version of the past until the present locks it in. Now, physicists will say it's not really changing the past, it's about correlations, not causation. But still, the data doesn't lie. The pattern you get on the detector depends on what you choose to measure afterward. It's like the universe leaves its options open. It waits to decide what happened, until you ask. And once again, we're forced to admit, in the quantum world, time isn't what we thought, and neither is causality. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. In everyday life, we like to think we can know things exactly, where something is, how fast it's going, what it's doing right now. But at the quantum level, precision falls apart. That's the uncertainty principle. Introduced by Werner Heisenberg in 1927. It says, the more precisely you know the position of a particle, the less precisely you can know its momentum, and vice versa. It's not a flaw in the equipment. It's not bad measurements or shaky hands. It's built into the structure of the universe. Let's say you try to pinpoint the exact location of an electron. To do that, you have to bounce something off it, like a photon. But the moment that photon hits the electron, it pushes it. You've changed its speed, its momentum, just by trying to find out where it is. So you can know where it is, but you've just messed up how fast it's going. Try the opposite, measure its momentum precisely, and now its position becomes blurry. This is not a technical limit. It's a natural one. There's a minimum amount of uncertainty built into reality, a kind of cosmic trade-off. And the more you try to shrink one side, the more the other side pushes back. This principle doesn't just apply to electrons, it underlies the energy levels of atoms, the structure of matter, even the reason why atoms don't collapse. And it shows us that certainty, as we understand it, doesn't exist down here. Particles don't have perfectly fixed properties. They exist in ranges of possibility, described by probabilities, not guarantees. And the moment you ask the universe for an exact answer, it refuses. The more you look, the fuzzier it gets. Maxwell's demon. Imagine a box. Inside there's gas, a bunch of fast-moving particles bouncing around at random. Now divide the box into two sides, left and right. They're connected by a tiny door, and standing at that door is a demon. Not a spooky one, just a tiny creature with perfect vision and instant reflexes. Whenever a fast particle comes near, the demon opens the door and lets it pass to the right side. If a slow particle comes by, it goes to the left. Over time, the right side fills with fast particles. It gets hotter. The left side gets cooler. So now you've created a temperature difference from nothing. Without doing any work. That's a violation of the second law of thermodynamics, which says entropy, the amount of disorder, always increases in a closed system. You can't just organize heat like that. No engine is perfect. No energy transformation is free. But the demon just did it. That's Maxwell's demon, a thought experiment proposed by James Clerk Maxwell in 1867 to challenge the laws of thermodynamics. It looks like magic, but the catch is, information isn't free either. To sort the particles, the demon must observe them, track them, record them, and storing or erasing that information requires energy. That's the loophole breaker. In the 20th century, physicists like Leo Szilard and Rolf Landauer showed that even measuring and forgetting information has thermodynamic cost. The demon can't cheat physics because the act of knowing costs something. So in the end, entropy wins. The second law survives, but the demon leaves behind an important idea. Information is physical. It's not just abstract. It has mass, energy, cost. And that realization changed everything, from computing to quantum theory. So Maxwell's demon didn't break physics, it made it smarter. Brain in a vat. Imagine this, you're not sitting in a room right now. You're not wearing headphones. You're not even in a body. You're just a brain, suspended in a vat of nutrients. Electrodes hooked into your neurons. Every sound, every sight, every feeling, fed to you by a supercomputer. As far as you know, this is your life, but none of it is real. That's the brain in a vat paradox. It's a modern twist on a very old problem. How do you know that what you're experiencing is actually real? Not just a dream, not a simulation, not some illusion carefully crafted to feel like reality. Because here's the catch. If you were a brain in a vat, being fed fake input, you'd never know. Everything would feel exactly the same. You'd still feel hunger, emotions, pain. You'd still remember birthdays and recognize faces. All of it, part of the simulation. So how could you ever prove that your world is real? Maybe you say, well, I can touch things. But in the vat, your touch is simulated. Maybe you say, I think, therefore I am. Okay, but that only proves you exist, not the world around you. This paradox was built to challenge epistemology, the study of knowledge. It asks, if your senses can be tricked, what can you actually know for sure? And it matters more than you think. Because with modern VR, neural interfaces, and AI, we're inching closer to the day when simulated experiences become indistinguishable from real ones. So maybe the real question isn't, are you a brain in a vat? Maybe it's, would it even matter if you were? Paradox of personal identity. Let's ask something basic. Who are you? You might say your name, your job, your memories, maybe your personality. I'm funny. I'm quiet. I love coffee. But here's the question. What exactly makes you you? Because your body changes, your thoughts change, your personality matures, shifts, maybe flips entirely. Your memories fade. Even your cells, every 7 years or so, you've replaced almost all of them. So if everything in you can change, what's the part that stays the same? This is the paradox of personal identity. It's the puzzle of how a person remains the same person over time, even as every part of them transforms. Let's push it further. Imagine you go into surgery. Doctors replace part of your brain, then another part, then more. Eventually, they've swapped your whole brain out, neuron by neuron, with perfect synthetic replacements. You wake up. You still feel like you. Same memories, same opinions. Are you still the same person? What if we made a perfect copy of you down to the atom? That copy wakes up with your memories, your habits, your voice. It thinks it's you. Is it? Now imagine you both exist at the same time. Which one is the real you? The problem is there's no clear line, no central you we can point to. You're not your body. You're not your thoughts. You're not even your history, because that too can be rewritten, forgotten, or faked. Some philosophers say identity is just a story, a narrative you tell yourself. Others say it's continuity of consciousness, the unbroken thread of awareness. And some say there is no fixed self. You're just a process, a changing system pretending to be stable. And yet, you still feel like you, even as everything about you changes. That's the paradox. You're always becoming someone else, but never stop being you. Digital self paradox. Let's be honest, you probably exist more online than offline. Your photos, your messages, your playlists, your search history, your voice memos, your likes, dislikes, your sense of humor, all recorded somewhere. Now think about this. If someone only knew your digital self, would they know the real you? Or would they know a version of you that's somehow clearer, more consistent than the physical one? That's the digital self paradox. It asks, when your real life and your digital life start to drift apart, which one is really you? Think about how you present yourself on social media. You don't post every thought. You curate. You filter. Maybe you're more bold, more witty, more political, or more quiet than you are in person. But the people who follow you, that version is the one they know, and maybe even trust more than the in-person you. Now here's where it gets weird. Your digital self doesn't forget. It doesn't sleep. It doesn't age. It keeps showing people the same posts, the same photos, the same opinions, even after you've grown past them. It's static, but it also updates. It can be copied, stolen, altered, sold, archived, and someday, even after you're gone, it might still speak for you. That version might outlive you, be studied, replayed, interacted with by AI. And it raises a strange question. If your digital self can be more consistent, more influential, and more accessible than your physical one, does it become more real than you? Are you the person walking around, or the one being watched? And what happens when the gap between them grows too wide? The digital self paradox isn't about the future, it's about right now. Because chances are, someone out there already knows you through a version of you that doesn't blink. Memory erasure paradox. You've gone through something awful, a trauma, a heartbreak, a mistake that haunts you every day. Now imagine this. A treatment exists. A pill, a surgery, a procedure, whatever. It can target that memory and erase it completely. Gone. Like it never happened. You'd still have the rest of your life, your other memories, your personality, just without that one scar. Here's the question. If you remove the memory, are you still you? That's the memory erasure paradox. On the surface, it sounds like healing. Why suffer from something you can't change? But memories don't just sit in your head like files. They shape you. Pain changes how you treat others. Mistakes change what you choose. Trauma can give you empathy, or make you cautious, guarded, strong. Even if you hate the memory, It helped build the person you are today. So if you take it out, who are you now? It gets worse. What if you erased the memory of a relationship? Someone you loved, or hurt, or lost. They remember everything, and you remember nothing. How do you explain that? Or what if you erase a guilt that made you kinder, a fear that kept you safe, a loss that gave your life meaning? This paradox forces us to ask, are you defined by what you remember, or are you better off free from the weight? Because maybe erasing the memory saves you, but maybe it breaks the story that was holding you together. And maybe the scariest part isn't forgetting. Maybe it's waking up one day and realizing something's missing, something shaped you, and now it's gone. Forgotten dream paradox. You wake up, your heart is racing. You feel nervous, or calm, or incredibly sad. But you don't know why. You sit up in bed and try to remember what just happened. But there's nothing, just a feeling, with no memory attached. This is the forgotten dream paradox. It asks a simple question. If a dream affects you emotionally, but you can't remember it, did it really happen to you? Think about it. You might spend hours dreaming every night, full of events, people, even entire lifetimes. But the moment you wake up, most of it disappears. Gone, like it never happened. And yet, the feeling stays. The fear, the peace, the loneliness. Something inside you remembers, even if your mind doesn't. So what do we do with that? If a dream made you cry, but you can't recall it, was that a real experience? If a dream taught you something about yourself, about someone else, but it vanished on waking, did you still grow from it? And if your mood shifts, your choices shift, your whole day is shaped by a dream, you can't recall who's really in control. This paradox messes with the idea that conscious memory defines experience, because clearly you can be changed by something you don't remember, something you may never understand, and that's what makes it so disturbing. You might be haunted by something that technically never happened, not in the waking world, not in a way you can explain, but you still carry it. So, if a dream leaves no trace in your memory, but reshapes your emotions, did you dream it? Or did the dream dream you? Observer vanishing paradox. Every experience you've ever had has had one thing in common. You're the observer, the one seeing, hearing, thinking. Even when things get blurry or weird or abstract, you're still there, experiencing it. But what happens when the observer itself disappears? That's the observer vanishing paradox. It starts with a basic assumption: you are the one doing the watching. But if you've ever meditated deeply, or entered a dream where you weren't you, or even gone under anesthesia, you've touched the edge of something strange. Moments where there's experience, but no clear observer, no commentary, no voice in the head saying this is me. Just pure happening, detached, empty, silent. And it raises a question. If an experience occurs, but there's no sense of self watching it, did it happen to anyone? What if your sense of I is just a mental habit? What if the observer isn't real, just another process in the mind that can flicker, fade, or turn off completely? Some people who've had near-death experiences, ego dissolution from psychedelics, or intense trauma describe something similar, a moment where they were not the observer. The self vanished, and what was left was a awareness, but without a center. So here's the paradox. If the thing that experiences reality can disappear, what's left to say the experience ever happened at all? And if the observer is just another part of the system, something that can be turned on or off, then who exactly is asking these questions? What watches the watcher when the watcher disappears? Problem of other minds. Look around. The people in your life, family, friends, strangers, they talk, laugh, get angry, cry. They seem alive. They react. They express emotions. They tell you what they think and how they feel. But here's the disturbing part. You don't actually know they're conscious. You assume it because they behave like you. They sound like you. They look hurt when hurt, and happy when happy, but that's all behavior. It's not proof of an inner world. This is the problem of other minds, one of the oldest, simplest, and most impossible philosophical questions. How do you know anyone else is actually experiencing anything at all? You know you have thoughts. You can feel pain, joy, boredom. That's first-hand knowledge, direct and undeniable. But everyone else? You're guessing. For all you know, they could be like NPCs, non-player characters, running scripts, complex, convincing, but hollow inside. And here's the catch. There's no test for consciousness. No scan, no question, no signal that proves awareness. A robot could pass every behavioral test. A human could say everything right and still be empty inside. We don't even know what consciousness is. We just know what it feels like to have it. So we assume others do too. Because the alternative that you're alone in a world of shadows is too much to bear. But the paradox remains. You can never escape your own perspective. And no matter how many people surround you, you might be the only one who's actually awake. Inverted spectrum problem. Let's say I hand you a red apple. You look at it and say, "Yep, that's red." No hesitation. No confusion. But what if my red is your green? Like literally, what you see when you look at a red apple might be what I see when I look at leaves or grass. Same word, different experience. This is the inverted spectrum problem. A thought experiment that asks, what if two people see colors, or hear sounds, or feel sensations in completely different ways, but still call them by the same names? Think about it. You learned what red means by pointing to red things. Your parents said, "That's red," so you call that experience red, whatever it looks like to you. But there's no way to know if that feeling, that color, that internal experience, your qualia, is the same for me. We could both pass every test. Both recognize stop signs, ripe strawberries, danger signals. We both say red, but are we seeing the same thing? Or are our minds playing different movies? And no one ever notices. The scary part? You can't measure qualia. You can't look inside someone's experience and compare it to yours. There's no color scanner for the mind. And it doesn't stop at color. What if your pain feels like my tickle? What if your calm is my emptiness? What if the world inside your head is just fundamentally different? This isn't just a cute puzzle. It challenges the idea that language, science, and behavior are enough to understand minds. Because all of that happens on the outside. The inside could be anything. And maybe, in the end, we're all living in different universes. We've just learned to call them the same thing. Homunculus Paradox. Close your eyes for a second and imagine you're thinking. You hear your own inner voice. You picture something. You remember something. You decide something. But who's doing that? Who's the you behind your thoughts? Some people imagine a little observer inside their head, watching, deciding, controlling. That idea has a name. The homunculus, Latin for little man. It's the idea that there's a smaller version of you inside your brain, experiencing what you experience and pulling the strings. But here's the problem. If there's a little person inside your head, then who's inside their head? A smaller homunculus? And inside that one, another? You've just created an infinite loop, a paradox of observers that never ends. That's the homunculus paradox. It's the idea that if you try to explain consciousness by saying something inside is watching, then you still haven't explained anything. Because now you have to explain the watcher, and then the watcher of the watcher, forever. It's like explaining a TV by saying there's a tiny person inside watching the shows. You haven't solved the mystery. You've just pushed it back a layer. This paradox exposes a deeper problem. We want to believe that behind all our thoughts and actions, there's a central self, a captain of the ship, sitting at the controls. But neuroscience doesn't support that. There's no single place in your brain where you live. No control room, no seat of consciousness, just processes, neurons, patterns firing. And somehow all that creates the illusion of a central self. Shoot. So maybe there isn't a little person inside your head. Maybe there's just a system. So well organized it feels like someone's in charge, even though there isn't. And maybe the voice in your head? It's not a pilot. It's just the echo of the system trying to understand itself. The trolley problem. A trolley is speeding down the tracks. Ahead 5 people are tied up. They can't move. If the train continues, it will hit and kill all 5. But you're standing next to a lever. If you pull it, the trolley will switch to another track, where there's just one person tied up. You have 2 choices: do nothing and let 5 people die, or pull the lever and actively kill one person to save the others. What do you do? That's the trolley problem. A thought experiment first posed in the 1960s. It looks simple, but it opens up a nightmare of ethical contradictions. If you believe in utilitarianism, the idea that the best action is the one that maximizes total good, you should pull the lever, save 5, lose 1. The math checks out, but others say, no. If you pull the lever, you're not saving 5 lives, you're killing 1, and that makes you morally responsible. You've gone from a bystander to a killer. It gets worse. What if the 1 person is a child? What if the 5 are criminals? What if you're not just pulling a lever, you're pushing someone in front of the trolley? Every variation of the trolley problem forces you to confront the same question: is it worse to cause harm or to allow harm to happen? And is inaction truly innocent, or just a quieter form of guilt? The trolley problem shows that morality isn't clean. It's full of uncomfortable math, gut instincts, emotional bias, and deep contradictions. And maybe the scariest part isn't what you choose. Maybe it's realizing that, deep down, you'd hesitate. Experience machine. Imagine this. A machine can give you any experience you want. Total happiness, love, adventure, achievement. You plug in and it stimulates your brain so perfectly that you'll never know it's not real. You want to climb Everest? You will. Write a best-selling novel? Done. Fall in love with the perfect partner? Absolutely. No pain, no regret, just endless joy. But the life isn't real. Your body is floating in a tank. Your friends, your triumphs, your struggles, all artificial. A dream you can't wake up from. That's the experience machine. A thought experiment from philosopher Robert Nozick. And here's the question. Would you plug in? At first, it sounds tempting. Why suffer? Why fail? Why face heartbreak, boredom, aging, death, when you could feel total bliss instead? But then something hits you. If everything is fake, does it still matter? Would your relationships have meaning? Would your accomplishments feel hollow? Would you be you anymore, or just a character in a simulation designed to please you? And most people, maybe not all, but most hesitate, because deep down, we don't just want happiness. We want something real. We want to struggle for meaning, to make hard choices, to feel pain, and know it meant something. And if we give all that up for comfort, what are we left with? The experience machine forces us to confront the value of reality itself. It's not about whether the simulation is good, it's about whether we're the kind of people who care if it's real. So here's the paradox. You can have a perfect life, no pain, no fear, no failure, but you may have to give up the very thing that makes life feel worth it.
Reality.
Omnipotence paradox. Can an all-powerful being create a rock so heavy that even it can't lift it? Seems like a silly question, but it's not. It's the omnipotence paradox, a classic dilemma that challenges the very concept of absolute power. If the answer is yes, the being can create the rock, then there's something it can't do, lift it. But if the answer is no, it can't create the rock, then there's still something it can't do, create it. Either way, there's something this being can't do. So, is it really all-powerful? This paradox has been debated for centuries, especially in theology, where omnipotence is often attributed to God. Some people try to solve it by redefining power. They say omnipotence doesn't mean the ability to do logically impossible things. It just means the ability to do anything that makes sense. In that view, asking for a rock so heavy that an all-powerful being can't lift it is like asking for a square circle. It's not a task, it's a contradiction. Others say, real power includes the freedom to limit yourself. So maybe the being can create the rock and choose not to lift it voluntarily. But that opens another problem. If a being can limit itself and choose to stay limited, then is it truly omnipotent at all times? This paradox forces us to ask, is the idea of unlimited power logically coherent? Or is it just something we say, without really thinking through what it means? And maybe the real issue isn't whether an all-powerful being can lift a rock. Maybe it's this: can any system include everything, even the power to break itself, and still make sense? Problem of evil. Look at the world. There's beauty, love, compassion, but there's also suffering. Deep, pointless, overwhelming suffering. Children die. Innocent people are tortured. Nature destroys without mercy. People inflict horrors on each other every day. And here's the paradox. If a God exists, one that is all-powerful, all-knowing, and morally perfect, why does this happen? That's the problem of evil. It's one of the oldest and most powerful arguments against the existence of a traditional all-good deity. The logic goes like this. If God is all-powerful, he could stop evil. If he is all-good, he would want to stop evil. But evil exists. So either he can't stop it or doesn't want to. Either way, something breaks. Some believers respond with free will, saying that suffering exists because humans have the freedom to choose, even when they choose evil. But that doesn't explain natural disasters, childhood cancer, or the suffering of animals, where no human choice is involved. Others argue that suffering builds character, or serves a higher purpose we can't understand. But then we have to ask, how much suffering is too much, and why does that purpose seem so random, so cruel? This paradox doesn't just attack theology, it attacks the idea that the universe has a moral structure at all. It makes people ask, is the world fundamentally unjust? Or are we wrong to expect justice in the first place? If good and evil exist, do they mean anything beyond how they make us feel? There are answers, but none of them are easy. And none of them erase the fact that every day innocent beings suffer. So the problem of evil remains. Not just a question for philosophers, but a question every person eventually faces. How do you make sense of a world where good people hurt and bad people win? Paradox of tolerance. Tolerance sounds like a virtue. Let people speak their minds. Live and let live. Agree to disagree. But here's the problem. What happens when the thing you're tolerating is intolerance itself? That's the paradox of tolerance, first described by philosopher Karl Popper. He warned that if a society is endlessly tolerant, if it refuses to stand up against intolerance, then eventually the intolerant will rise, take over, and destroy the very freedom that allowed them in. In other words, tolerance without limits can lead to the end of tolerance. Think of a public square. You open it to all voices, civil debate, disagreement, even unpopular views. But then someone steps in with a megaphone and says, let's ban this group, let's silence that voice, let's burn it all down. If you let them speak unchecked, if you tolerate their intolerance, they don't just want to join the conversation, they want to end it. And if they gain enough power, they will. This paradox shows up in democracies, in free speech debates, in internet moderation, in public policy. Every time someone asks, should we allow all speech, even hateful, violent, destructive speech? The paradox answers, not if you want to keep the system alive. Because freedom isn't just about openness. It's about boundaries, drawn not out of fear but out of wisdom. And that's the tension. If you silence people too quickly, you become the oppressor. But if you never push back, you invite your own destruction. So the paradox of tolerance forces us to choose. To protect an open society, you may have to be closed to those who would close it. The twin paradox. Two identical twins, same age, same birthday, same everything. One of them stays on Earth, The other becomes an astronaut, boards a spaceship, and travels near the speed of light. They fly around the galaxy, zipping through space for what feels like a year. Then they come back home. And when they return, the twin on Earth has aged more. Not by a few minutes, by years. That's the twin paradox. It's a real prediction of Einstein's theory of relativity. And no, it's not a trick. Time actually moves slower for the twin who traveled through space at high speed. From their perspective, nothing strange happened. Their clock ticked normally. They ate meals, slept, aged, just like usual. But for the twin on Earth, more time passed. This isn't science fiction. It's physics. It's called time dilation. The faster you move, the slower time flows relative to someone at rest. And it's been confirmed using atomic clocks on fast-moving jets and GPS satellites, which have to adjust for both speed and gravity to stay accurate. So why is it called a paradox? Because at first glance, it feels like both twins should see the other aging more slowly. Each one sees the other as the one who's moving, so who's actually younger? But here's the catch. The twin who left Earth had to accelerate, turn around, and come back. That acceleration breaks the symmetry. Only the traveling twin experienced those forces. So the situation isn't perfectly equal, and relativity predicts the difference exactly. This paradox shows that time is not fixed. It's not universal. It's not ticking at the same rate for everyone. The faster you move, the more you stretch time. And in extreme cases, you can come home to a world that's aged decades, while you've only aged a year. It sounds like magic, but it's math, and it's built into the fabric of the universe. Paradox of hedonism. You want to be happy. Of course you do. So you chase it. You seek pleasure. You avoid pain. You set goals. You dream about the life you want. But somehow, the harder you chase happiness, the more it slips away. That's the paradox of hedonism. The idea that happiness can't be pursued directly. You can't just grab it. You can't force yourself into bliss. And the more you focus on it, asking, am I happy yet? Am I happy now? The more you notice that you're not. It's like trying to fall asleep by concentrating harder, or trying to be spontaneous by planning every second. The act of focusing on the outcome kills the feeling you're trying to reach. This paradox was recognized by philosophers like John Stuart Mill, someone who believed deeply in happiness as a moral goal. And even he admitted, those only are happy who have their minds fixed on some object other than their own happiness. In other words, people find happiness when they forget about it, when they're chasing purpose, love, creation, growth, not when they're checking a happiness meter every 5 minutes. Think about the happiest moments of your life. Were you calculating them? Were you asking, is this joy efficient enough? Or were you just there, absorbed in something bigger than yourself? That's the secret the paradox of hedonism reveals. Happiness isn't something you catch. It's something that happens as a side effect. And if you chase it too hard, you might end up further from it than you were before you started. Paradox of tragedy. You know the feeling. You watch a heartbreaking movie. You finish a sad novel. You listen to a song that crushes your chest with its sadness. And somehow, you love it. You wanted to feel that ache. You chose the story that made you cry. You even recommend it to your friends afterward. Why? That's the paradox of tragedy, sometimes called the paradox of painful art. It asks, why do we seek out experiences that make us feel emotions we normally avoid? In real life, grief is devastating. Loss rips you apart. Heartbreak ruins your appetite, your sleep, your sense of safety. But in art, you run toward it. You pay money to feel sadness. You call it beautiful. You say it moved you, even though it hurt. The paradox is that tragedy feels bad, and yet somehow it feels good. Philosophers have suggested a few reasons. Maybe it's distance. You feel the emotion, but deep down you know you're safe. Maybe it's purification. Aristotle called it catharsis, the cleansing of emotions. Maybe it's meaning. Tragedy reminds you that life is fragile, precious, fleeting. Or maybe we're wired to crave intensity even when it hurts. Because sadness in its own way is alive. It forces you to feel deeply, to remember you're capable of caring, of loving, of losing. And in a world numbed by noise and routine, sometimes tragedy is the thing that cuts through and reaches you. So the paradox of tragedy isn't really about sadness. It's about how beauty and pain, in the right light, become the same thing. Mere addition paradox. Imagine this. You have a world. It's filled with people who live amazing lives, rich in joy, art, love, discovery. Now you could add more people to this world, new people who are perfectly happy. But their lives are just okay. Not great, not awful, just modestly pleasant. Here's the catch. Adding these people doesn't make anyone else worse off. No suffering, no loss, just more people, each having a pretty good, not amazing life. Is that world better? It feels like it should be. More happiness, more lives worth living. But if you keep going, keep adding more and more merely okay lives, the average quality of life drops. Eventually, you end up with a huge population of people whose lives are barely worth living, but technically still positive. And here's the paradox. That gigantic mediocre world is supposed to be better than the smaller world, full of incredibly rich, vibrant lives. That's the mere addition paradox, or sometimes called the repugnant conclusion, named by philosopher Derek Parfit. It forces you to confront a brutal question. Is more happiness always better, even if it's thinner, weaker, cheaper happiness? If you judge based on total happiness, yes. But if you care about quality of life, suddenly quantity feels like a trap. The paradox exposes a hidden tension. Do we care about the sum of happiness, or the depth of happiness? And if it's just numbers, could the best world be one where everyone is barely, technically okay? It's unsettling, because it shows that trying to optimize happiness blindly, without thinking about how happiness exists, can lead to a world none of us would actually want to live in. Omniscience versus free will paradox. Imagine there's a being, call it God, call it fate, call it the universe itself. This being knows everything, not just the past, not just the present, the entire future. It knows what you'll eat for breakfast tomorrow. It knows when you'll fall in love. It knows the exact second you'll take your last breath. Now here's the problem. If the future is already known, can you do anything differently? If you were truly free, if your choices were open, then even an all-knowing being couldn't predict you perfectly. But if it can predict you, if it knows you'll pick coffee instead of tea, if it knows you'll say yes instead of no, then wasn't your choice already locked in? That's the omniscience versus free will paradox. It's the collision of two deep human instincts. We want to believe in free will, that our decisions matter, that we could have chosen differently. And we want to believe in higher order, that there's knowledge, structure, meaning beyond chaos. But if someone or something already knows your entire path, is choice even real? Some people try to escape the paradox by redefining free will. They say, sure, your choices are known, but they're still yours. You're not forced by knowledge itself. You still wanted what you chose. Others say, if the future is knowable at all, then the universe is a script, and you're just reading your lines. No improvisation, no real freedom. Just the illusion of choice, while the ending's already written. And here's the most disturbing part. Even without gods or cosmic forces, even if you could predict your own future, would that make you feel more free? Or would you realize you're just following tracks you can't leave? The omniscience versus free will paradox leaves us with a haunting thought. Maybe you are choosing. Maybe you feel the weight of every decision. But maybe there was only ever one road you could walk. Prisoner's dilemma. Imagine you and your friend get arrested. You're both accused of a crime, and the police separate you into two rooms. No communication, no signals, just cold silence. Then each of you is given a deal. If you betray your friend, snitch on them, and they stay silent, you go free and they get a heavy sentence. If you both betray each other, you both get a medium sentence, worse than staying silent, but better than taking the full blame. If you both stay silent, you both get a light sentence, barely anything. So what do? Here's the catch: betraying your friend, snitching, is always the rational move. Because no matter what your friend does, betraying them either sets you free or gets you a lighter sentence than if you stayed loyal. But if both of you betray each other, you end up worse off than if you'd both just stayed silent. That's the prisoner's dilemma. It shows how rational self-interest, smart thinking by individuals, can create worse outcomes for everyone. And it's not just a prison fantasy. This paradox is everywhere. In politics, where countries race to arm themselves instead of cooperating. In business, where companies undercut each other until profits collapse. In everyday life, when trust breaks down between people trying to protect themselves. The lesson? Trust is risky. Betrayal is safe. But too much safe thinking destroys everything. And even when you both know cooperation would be better, fear and logic push you apart. The prisoner's dilemma reveals that the real enemy sometimes isn't the other person. It's the structure of the situation itself. Newcomb's Paradox. You're standing in front of two boxes. Box A is transparent. You can see it has $1,000 inside. Box B is opaque. You can't see what's inside. You have two choices. Take only box B. Take both boxes, A and B. Now here's the twist. There's a super intelligent predictor involved. This predictor has watched you your whole life. They're not magic, just incredibly good at guessing what you'll do. Before you made your choice, the predictor already filled the boxes based on what they expected. If they predicted you'd take only box B, they put $1 million inside. If they predicted you'd take both, they left box B empty. Right now, the boxes are sealed. The decision has already been made. So what do? Take just box B and trust the predictor filled it with $1 million. Or take both boxes, grab the guaranteed $1,000 and whatever's in B because, hey, the contents are already locked in, right? That's Newcomb's Paradox. And here's why it messes with people. Rational thinking says, the boxes are already packed. My choice can't change the past. Take both. Get the extra $1,000. But the setup says, the predictor is almost always right. If you take both, they probably predicted it, and box B is empty. If you take only B, you probably get the million. Trust the predictor or trust cold logic. No matter what, it feels like you're making the wrong move. And Newcomb's Paradox drills straight into a bigger problem. Does your decision cause the outcome, or does the prediction about you cause the decision? It's a loop, a trap, a staring contest between free will and fate. Abilene Paradox. Imagine it's a boiling hot day. You and your family are sitting around, sweating, bored. Someone says, hey, why don't we drive to Abilene? Grab some dinner, get out of the house. Nobody's super excited. The drive is long, it's hot, it sounds miserable, but nobody wants to be the buzzkill, so you all nod. Sure, let's go. You pile into the car, drive for hours through the blazing heat, eat a meal no one enjoys, and drive back exhausted. Finally back home, someone says, I didn't actually want to go. And then someone else says, wait, me neither. Turns out, no one wanted to go to Abilene. But everyone thought everyone else wanted to go. So they went. That's the Abilene Paradox, discovered by management expert Jerry B. Harvey. It's when a group of people collectively decide on a course of action that nobody actually supports, because each person believes the others want it. It's not peer pressure. It's not manipulation. It's just miscommunication, fueled by a fear of rocking the boat. And it happens everywhere. In companies, when teams launch projects no one really believes in. In families, when everyone agrees to painful holidays out of politeness. In friendships, when no one says, actually, I don't want to. The scary part, everyone's trying to please everyone else. And the result is mutual misery. The Abilene Paradox teaches a brutal truth. Groups don't just fail because of conflict. They also fail because of too much fake agreement. And sometimes the bravest thing you can say isn't yes, it's actually, I don't want that. Paradox of voting. Imagine an election. There are 3 candidates, A, B, and C. You gather a group of voters, smart, honest, thoughtful people, and let them rank their preferences. Here's how it breaks down. 1/3 of voters prefer A over B and B over C. 1/3 prefer B over C and C over A. 1/3 prefer C over A and A over B. Now let's run some head-to-head matchups. A versus C or B over B. B versus C or B wins. C versus C or B wins. Third per C or B wins. C versus C or B wins. Wait, what? There's no clear winner. Whoever you pick, someone else beats them in another matchup. This endless loop, where A beats B, B beats C, but C beats A, is the Condorcet paradox. It shows that even when every individual has logical consistent preferences, the group's collective choice can be completely inconsistent. You don't get a clear winner, you get a cycle, an endless logical deadlock, and it's not just theory. This paradox shows up in real-world elections, committee decisions, awards voting, anywhere you ask a group to rank their choices. It reveals a deep flaw in democracy and group decision-making. Majority rule doesn't always produce a rational or fair outcome. Sometimes it just produces a loop, where choice feels like it's happening, but no stable answer exists. And worse, clever manipulators can take advantage of it, changing the order of matchups, framing choices differently, flipping outcomes not by changing minds, but by gaming the system itself. So the paradox of voting forces us to ask, when we say the people have spoken, did they really? Or did the system just pick someone because it had to? Ellsberg Paradox. Imagine I offer you a bet. There's an urn with 90 balls inside. 30 are red. The other 60 are either black or yellow, but you don't know how many are black or how many are yellow. Now the game. Option A, you win if you draw a red ball. Option B, you win if you draw a black ball. Which do you choose? Most people pick option A, the red ball, because at least they know there are 30 red balls. With black, who knows? Maybe there's only one. Maybe 59. Even if the actual odds might be better, the uncertainty freaks people out. Now a second round. Option C. You win if you draw a red or yellow ball. Option D. You win if you draw a black or yellow ball. Here people usually pick option D, because again they want to avoid betting only on black, the uncertain color. But here's the twist. Your choices are inconsistent. You prefer red over black, but also prefer black-yellow over red. Yellow. Your decisions flip-flop depending on where the uncertainty hides. That's the Ellsberg Paradox. It proves that people aren't rational about probabilities. We don't just weigh risks, we hate uncertainty itself. Risk means known odds, like rolling a die. Uncertainty means unknown odds, and our brains treat that as way scarier, even if it's not logically worse. This paradox shows up everywhere. In investing, where people panic at uncertainty more than losses. In politics, where vague threats scare voters more than real ones. In daily life, where we sometimes choose the devil we know just to avoid ambiguity. The Ellsberg Paradox teaches a brutal truth. We'd rather gamble with bad odds than admit we don't know the odds at all. And most of the time what we fear isn't risk. It's not knowing. Paradox of choice. Imagine walking into a supermarket. You just want to buy some jam. Simple, right? But there are 30 flavors. Organic, sugar-free, imported, local, berry blends you didn't even know existed. You stand there frozen. Should you pick the one you know? Should you try something new? What if you choose wrong? What if there's something better? 2 shelves down. You feel stressed. You start second-guessing. Maybe you leave without buying anything at all. That's the paradox of choice, described by psychologist Barry Schwartz. It turns out, more options don't always make you happier. They make you more anxious, less satisfied, and more likely to regret whatever you pick. We love the idea of freedom, the ability to choose anything, but when the possibilities explode, the decision-making pressure explodes with it. Here's why. Opportunity cost. Every option you don't pick feels like a loss. Anticipated regret. You imagine picking wrong and feeling stupid later. Self-blame. If you're unhappy, it's your fault, because you chose. Analysis. Paralysis. Too many options overload your brain and shut down action. The strange thing is, when you have just 2 or 3 options, you feel in control. You choose. You move on. But when you have 50, every decision feels like a potential failure. And the more important the choice feels, like picking a career, a relationship, a life path, the heavier the paralysis becomes. So ironically, the more freedom you have, the less free you feel. Paradox of inquiry. You want to learn something new. You want to find the truth, figure out a mystery, understand something you've never understood before. Simple enough, right? But stop for a second. If you already know what you're looking for, you don't need to search. You already have it. And if you don't know what you're looking for, how would you even recognize it when you find it? That's the paradox of inquiry, first described by the philosopher Plato in his dialogue Meno. Here's the basic problem. If you know what you're seeking, inquiry is unnecessary. If you don't know what you're seeking, inquiry is impossible. In either case, how does learning ever happen? Imagine trying to solve a mystery when you don't even know what a solution looks like. Imagine trying to invent something you don't have words or concepts for. How would you even begin? It feels like you're stuck. You need some idea of the goal to start the journey. But if you already have that idea, then haven't you already found part of the answer? Some philosophers suggest that all inquiry depends on partial knowledge, little scraps of clues that help you ask the next question, even when you can't yet see the full picture. Others say maybe learning is less like targeting a destination and more like stumbling onto things that fit better and better over time. But either way, the paradox of inquiry forces you to confront a deep truth. Seeking knowledge isn't a straightforward hunt. It's a leap into the unknown, hoping you'll recognize something real when you stumble across it. And sometimes, you only understand what you were looking for after you already found it. Raven Paradox. Here's a simple statement. All ravens are black. Seems easy enough to prove, right? Just go out, find a bunch of ravens and see if they're black. Each black raven you see gives you more confidence that the statement is true. Now here's the twist. Logically, all ravens are black is equivalent to saying if something is not black, then it is not a raven. Same meaning, just flipped. So if you see a green apple, not black, not a raven, that technically confirms the idea that all ravens are black. Wait, what? A green apple is evidence that ravens are black. That's the Raven Paradox, first described by logician Carl Hempel, and it messes with your sense of what counts as evidence. Because if you follow strict logic, every non-black, non-raven thing you observe, an orange, a white cat, a pink flamingo, slightly confirms that all ravens are black. Even though intuitively it feels like you're just wasting time. In practice, we feel that only looking at actual ravens matters. But pure logic says every irrelevant object that isn't a black raven still slightly boosts your confidence. The Raven Paradox reveals a tension between formal logic, where any logically equivalent evidence counts, human intuition, where relevance matters way more than technical consistency, and it hints at a bigger truth. In science, logic alone isn't enough. We need judgment about what evidence actually matters. Otherwise, we'd be out here counting beach balls and bananas to prove ravens are black. Illusory truth effect. Imagine you hear a random fact. The Great Wall of China is visible from space. Sounds impressive, right? Maybe you doubt it a little. Maybe you shrug it off. Then a few days later you hear it again and again. Different people, different places. Each time you hear it, it feels a little more familiar, a little more believable. Eventually, you might start saying it yourself. Yeah, of course everyone knows that. Except it's not true. The Great Wall isn't visible from space with the naked eye. It never was. You just heard it enough times that it started feeling true. That's the illusory truth effect. It shows that the more often you hear something, whether it's true or false, the more true it feels, and your brain doesn't always double-check. It uses familiarity as a shortcut for accuracy. If something sounds familiar, it feels safe. If it feels safe, it feels trustworthy. And this shortcut was probably helpful in ancient times, when repeated warnings, "They are dad berry is poisonous," were crucial for survival. But today, it's weaponized everywhere. Fake news, advertising slogans, political propaganda, urban legends. Just by repeating, false ideas worm their way into memory, into belief, into action. The illusory truth effect teaches a harsh reality. What feels true isn't always what is true. And in a world drowning in information, the loudest lies often feel more real than the quiet truths. Quins Paradox. Imagine a heap of sand, thousands of grains piled up. No doubt, it's a heap. Now you remove one grain. Still a heap, right? No problem. Remove another. Still a heap. Keep going. One grain at a time. Slowly, patiently. At what point, exactly, does it stop being a heap? After 100 grains? After 1,000? After 99? There's no clear moment, no sharp line where you can say, now, it's no longer a heap. That's the Quins Paradox, also known as the paradox of the heap. It exposes a massive problem with vague concepts. If small changes don't seem to matter, but enough small changes transform everything, then when does the change actually happen? And it's not just about sand. Think about hair loss. When do you become bald? Aging. When does a young person become old? Moral decline. When does a good society become a corrupt one? Each tiny step feels harmless, undetectable, safe. But over time you cross invisible thresholds without noticing. And the paradox stabs at something uncomfortable. Most of the words and ideas we rely on, heap, bald, old, rich, poor, aren't based on clear boundaries. They're fuzzy, flexible, and sometimes dangerously easy to shift without anyone realizing. The Quins Paradox teaches this hard truth. Big changes don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they happen one harmless step at a time. Paradox of fiction. You cry when a character dies in a movie. You cheer when a hero wins. You get nervous during a horror story, even though you're completely safe. But you know the truth. None of it is real. The characters aren't real people. The events never happened. The danger is imaginary. And yet, you feel it. Deeply. Genuinely. That's the paradox of fiction. It asks, how can we have real emotions about things we know aren't real? If you fully believed the story was fiction, just actors, just words on a page, shouldn't you feel nothing? And yet, in practice, fiction moves us more reliably than reality sometimes does. Philosophers have tried to explain it. Maybe when you engage with a story, you suspend disbelief, temporarily pretending it's real. Maybe your emotional brain and your logical brain operate separately, so your heart reacts even when your mind knows better. Or maybe emotions don't need facts at all. Maybe emotions only need possibility, a glimpse of what could be, to come alive. Whatever the answer, the paradox shows something wild about human nature. We don't just react to reality, we react to meaning. If a story captures hope, loss, courage, betrayal, your brain treats it as real enough. Because in a way, it is. The characters may not exist, but the feelings they trigger, the grief, the pride, the fear, those are completely real. The paradox of fiction reminds us, what matters to the heart is not whether something happened, it's whether something could be true and whether it touches something real inside you. Paradox of suspense. You're watching a movie. The hero is sneaking through a hallway. You know, because you've seen it before, that a villain is about to jump out. You know exactly when it's coming. And yet, you're sitting there gripping your seat, heart racing, breath held. How? If you already know the outcome, shouldn't suspense disappear? That's the paradox of suspense. It asks, how can you feel tension, anxiety, and fear when there's no uncertainty? At first, it sounds like suspense should only work when you don't know what happens next. But clearly, that's not true. People rewatch thrillers, they reread mystery novels, they go back to the same scenes and still feel their stomachs twist. Why? Some theories say suspense isn't about uncertainty, it's about anticipation. The emotional weight of knowing what's coming, but not being able to stop it. Or maybe it's double awareness. Part of your brain knows the outcome, but another part gets pulled into the moment anyway. Or maybe suspense taps into something deeper. Hope versus fear. Even if you know logically that disaster is coming, you still hope, maybe, just maybe, this time things will turn out differently. You ride the tension not because you're ignorant, but because you're invested. And that tension is delicious. That moment where anything feels possible, even if your rational mind knows otherwise. The paradox of suspense shows that our emotions aren't ruled by what we know. They're ruled by what we feel while we're waiting. And sometimes, the story you know by heart is still powerful, simply because you care about how it unfolds. Moore's Paradox. Imagine you say this out loud. It's raining, but I don't believe it's raining. Or, this cake is delicious, but I don't think it's delicious. Technically, those sentences are grammatically fine. They're not nonsense words. Each half could even be true individually. Maybe it is raining. Maybe you genuinely don't believe it's raining. But when you put them together, your brain short-circuits. Because even if it's possible for both parts to be true, saying them together feels completely absurd. That's Moore's Paradox, named after philosopher G.E. Moore. It reveals a deep clash between what you say and what you're communicating when you say it. When you assert something, like it's raining, you're not just reporting a fact, you're implying you believe it's true. So when you immediately say, I don't believe it, you're breaking the social contract of communication. You're using language against itself. It's like standing on a stage and announcing, I am not speaking right now, or posting a giant sign that says, ignore this sign. Moore's paradox shows that communication isn't just about facts or grammar. It's about trust, belief, and internal consistency. And when those layers don't match up, even if the words technically fit, your mind throws a red flag. Because deep down, you expect language to mean more than just correct words. You expect it to make sense, coming from a real human being. Paradox of the preface. Imagine you've written a book. Hundreds of pages. You've checked every fact, every argument, every claim. You believe each sentence is true. But then in the preface, the part readers see first, you add a little note. Despite my best efforts, there are probably some errors in this book. Seems reasonable, right? Except, you just admitted you think something in your own book is wrong, while also saying you believe everything you wrote. That's the paradox of the preface, first pointed out by philosopher David Makinson. It reveals this weird split. On one hand, you believe every individual claim you made. On the other hand, you believe that statistically, given human fallibility, at least one of your claims must be wrong. And logically, those two beliefs clash. If you truly believe every statement is true, then how can you also believe that at least one is probably false? But emotionally, it feels perfectly normal. Because we know from experience, people make mistakes. Books have typos, memory slips. Even experts mess up. So you trust your work, but you also trust that you're imperfect. And here's why it matters. The paradox of the preface shows that being rational isn't just about avoiding contradictions. It's about managing them. It's about believing strongly and humbly at the same time, accepting that even when you try your best, there's always room for error. And maybe, just maybe, that tension between confidence and doubt isn't a flaw in how we think. Maybe it's what makes real thinking possible at all. The observer's paradox. Imagine you're trying to study people in the wild. You hide behind a tree, clipboard in hand, hoping to see how they behave naturally. But they notice you. Even if you don't interact, even if you don't say a word, they act differently. They walk straighter. They smile less. They talk louder. They perform. Just the fact that they're being watched changes their behavior. That's the observer's paradox. It asks, how can you study something's natural state if your attempt to study it automatically changes it? This isn't just about people. It shows up everywhere. In quantum physics, where observing a particle can alter its position or momentum. In sociology, where surveys change the way people answer. In psychology experiments, where participants behave better simply because they know they're part of a study. This even has a name, the Hawthorne effect. The paradox slices into a deep truth. You can't separate the observer from the observed. The moment you shine a light on something, even with the best intentions, you shift it, sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically. And the scarier part? You might not even realize you've changed it. You think you're seeing reality, but really you're seeing reality plus the distortion field you created by looking. The observer's paradox reminds us, there's no such thing as a perfectly neutral view. Observation isn't passive, it's participation. And sometimes, the more carefully you try to measure something, the further away the truth moves. The paradox of vagueness. You probably think you know what a bald man looks like, or what counts as a small town, or when something is expensive, but try defining them with perfect precision and everything falls apart. How many hairs does it take to not be bald? How many people turn a village into a city? At what price does cheap become expensive? You realize there's no clear line, no moment where the switch flips from not bald to bald. It just gradually happens. That's the paradox of vagueness. It highlights a huge crack hiding inside everyday language. We rely on fuzzy concepts to navigate the world, but when we push too hard for exact definitions, they break down. You might think, well, who cares? Everyone knows what baldness means in real life. But this fuzziness causes real problems. In law, when vague wording decides guilt or innocence. In ethics, when blurry boundaries cause massive debates. In science, when measuring a healthy weight or a safe exposure level gets messy. Vague terms seem harmless, even helpful, because they're flexible. But deep down, they carry a risk. Without sharp edges, we can't always tell when the meaning has shifted, or when we're arguing about something that doesn't even have a clear definition anymore. The paradox of vagueness leaves you with a strange realization. Sometimes we can live comfortably inside imprecise ideas, but when you demand exactness, even the simplest concepts collapse into mist. The paradox of translation. Imagine you're handed a book written in an ancient language. You don't know a single word of it, but you're asked to translate it perfectly. You study the patterns, you match symbols to objects. You guess meanings based on context. Over time, you build a full dictionary. You translate the whole book. But here's the unsettling thought. How do you know you got it right? Maybe the word you think means river actually means dream. Maybe the sentence you thought was about farming was actually about death. Maybe all your interpretations fit, but don't match the real meaning at all. That's the paradox of translation, sometimes called the indeterminacy of translation, famously explored by philosopher W.V.O. Quine. The problem isn't that translation is hard. The problem is that there might be no objective way to know if a translation is truly accurate. Because meaning isn't just about matching words, it's about context, culture, history, unspoken assumptions you don't even realize you're making. You can translate behavior. You can even translate usage, but you can't directly translate the internal world, the feelings, the thought structures behind the words. And if that's true, then every translation is also a kind of invention. It's not just swapping out words. It's building a bridge without ever seeing the other side. The paradox of translation hints at something deeper. Maybe communication isn't about transferring pure ideas. Maybe it's about creating shared meaning, even if it's never exactly the same on both sides. And maybe every word you hear, even in your own language, is already a translation of something you'll never fully grasp. The Fermi Paradox. Look up at the stars. Billions of galaxies. Each galaxy with billions of stars. Many of those stars have planets. Some of those planets are old enough, stable enough, Earth-like enough for life to exist. Simple math says even if intelligent life is rare, ridiculously rare, there should still be thousands or millions of alien civilizations out there. And yet, silence. No signals, no visits, no obvious signs, nothing. That's the Fermi Paradox, named after physicist Enrico Fermi, who famously asked, "Where is everybody?" The paradox is simple. If the universe is so big and life should be common, then why haven't we seen any signs of it? There are tons of theories. Maybe intelligent life is incredibly rare. Earth is a freak accident. Maybe civilizations destroy themselves before they can explore the stars. Maybe we're in a cosmic zoo, being deliberately isolated. Maybe we're just too early. The universe is still waking up. Or maybe we're just not listening the right way. The Fermi Paradox leaves an unsettling possibility hanging in the air. Maybe life isn't common. Maybe intelligence is a fluke. Maybe the silence isn't peaceful. Maybe it's a warning, because if the galaxy should be full of life, and yet we hear nothing, maybe the question isn't just, where is everybody? Maybe it's what happened to them. Boltzmann brain. Imagine the vast emptiness of space, cold, silent, infinite. Now imagine, by sheer random chance, atoms come together in just the right way to form a brain. Not a body, not a planet, just a brain. A brain complete with a rush of thoughts, a rush of memories, a rush of sensations, hearing, seeing, touching, all of it fake, all of it lasting for a moment. Then blink, the brain dissolves. That's the Boltzmann brain idea. It's named after physicist Ludwig Boltzmann, who proposed that the universe, given enough time, would naturally fluctuate into ordered states. Originally, Boltzmann thought, maybe our whole universe is just a rare fluctuation, a temporary bubble of order inside endless chaos. But if that's true, wouldn't it be far more likely for a single brain to form than an entire universe? After all, a brain is simpler, requires fewer particles, less structure. If random chance is running the show, then statistically it's easier for one isolated mind to pop into existence, with fake memories, fake sensations, than for a full planet, a full history, and a full reality to exist. Which leads to the horrifying thought, maybe you aren't a person in a real universe. Maybe you're a Boltzmann brain. Maybe your whole life, your childhood, your dreams, everything you remember is just a flash of static in the cosmic void. And when you blink again, it'll all vanish. The Boltzmann brain paradox cracks open a brutal possibility. If random fluctuations explain reality, then reality might not be what you think at all. And the more you think about it, the harder it gets to prove you're anything more than a flicker in the dark. The simulation hypothesis. Look around you. The trees, the air, the sound of your own breathing. Feels real, right? But what if, and stay with me here, this entire universe is a simulation? Not in a sci-fi movie kind of way, in a real serious mathematical way. That's the simulation hypothesis, made famous by philosopher Nick Bostrom. The basic argument goes like this. If technology keeps advancing, if civilizations survive long enough, eventually they'll be able to create ultra-powerful computers. Computers powerful enough to simulate entire worlds, entire histories, entire civilizations. And if it's possible, they probably won't stop at just one. They might create millions, billions of simulated realities. So now ask yourself, if simulated worlds vastly outnumber real ones, what are the odds that you just happen to be living in one of the rare real ones? Statistically, you're probably inside a simulation. Maybe it's a scientific experiment. Maybe it's entertainment. Maybe it's ancient history being replayed. Maybe you're just a character inside someone else's computer. Now, you might ask, wouldn't we notice glitches? Wouldn't the code break? maybe, déjà vu, weird coincidences, quantum uncertainty, all of it are just hints of the system underneath. Or maybe the simulation is perfect. So perfect you'll never find proof until whoever's running it pulls the plug. The simulation hypothesis forces a brutal question. Are you experiencing reality? Or just the illusion of reality, built for reasons you'll never know? And if it is a simulation, does that make your experiences less real? Or are you just as real as anything ever could be? Fine-tuning problem. The universe didn't have to look like this. It could have been pure chaos, empty, dead, silent, forever. But it's not. Instead, the laws of physics are incredibly precise. Gravity is just strong enough to form stars, but not so strong they collapse instantly. The electromagnetic force holds atoms together just right. The strength of nuclear reactions lets stars burn for billions of years, long enough for life to evolve. And here's the crazy part. Change almost any fundamental constant by even a tiny fraction, and the universe would become completely hostile to life. No stars, no chemistry, no stable matter at all. You wouldn't just not exist. Nothing would exist. This is the fine-tuning problem. It's the observation that the conditions of the universe seem almost absurdly perfect for life to arise. And it raises a terrifying question. Is this precision just a lucky accident? Because if it's random chance, the odds are so small, it's hard to even write them down. Some people argue, maybe there's a multiverse, billions of universes with different laws, and we just happen to be in the lucky one. Maybe there's some unknown deeper law that had to produce life-friendly conditions. Or maybe it's not an accident at all. Maybe the universe was designed, programmed, fine-tuned on purpose by something beyond what we can understand. The fine-tuning problem forces us to stare at an uncomfortable reality. Either we're impossibly lucky, or we're part of something much, much bigger than we realize. And whichever answer you lean toward, it's hard not to feel a little suspicious that we're even here asking the question at all. The anthropic principle. Think about it. You look around the universe, and it feels miraculous. The stars, the planets, the physics, the chemistry, all lined up just right to allow life to exist. It feels like some gigantic cosmic coincidence. But here's a thought. Of course the universe seems fine-tuned for life. Because if it weren't, you wouldn't be here to notice. That's the anthropic principle. It says, the universe must have the properties necessary for conscious life to observe it. Because otherwise, no one would be around asking questions. It sounds obvious, even trivial at first. But it flips everything. Instead of saying, wow, it's amazing that the universe fits us, it says, only in universes that fit beings like us could that amazement ever happen. In a billion dead, frozen, lifeless universes, there's no one to be surprised, no one to wonder, no one to notice anything at all. Only in the rare universe that happens to allow observers. Do observers exist to sit around and marvel at how lucky they are? Some people find the anthropic principle comforting, a neat explanation for fine-tuning without needing God, multiverses, or luck. Others hate it because it feels like a non-answer, like explaining away the mystery without solving it. Because sure, you can say we're here because we're here, but that still leaves a deeper itch. Why is there a universe at all that can allow this kind of existence? The anthropic principle offers a weird, half-satisfying, half-frustrating answer. You don't exist because the universe is special. The universe seems special because you exist. Poincaré recurrence. Imagine this. The universe is a giant machine. Particles flying around, bouncing off each other, following the laws of physics. Now imagine, it keeps going. And going forever. Here's the kicker. According to mathematics, if a system has a finite amount of energy and space, but infinite time, eventually, every possible arrangement of particles will happen again, not just similar events. Exactly the same. Your birth, your first kiss, the fall of civilizations, the last breath of the last star. All of it, repeating. That's the Poincaré recurrence theorem, named after mathematician Henri Poincaré, It says that if the universe never truly ends, then given enough time, everything you've ever known will recur, not once, but infinitely. The same conversations, the same mistakes, the same wars, the same loves. Maybe millions, billions, trillions of years apart, but eventually the universe will reshuffle itself into the same exact pattern you're living right now. And then again and again. It's not reincarnation. It's not memory. It's raw statistics, cranking out identical worlds by pure mathematical inevitability. Of course, this relies on the universe being closed, stable and eternal, which may or may not be true. But if it is, you're not just living your life once. You're stuck on a cosmic carousel, riding the same loop through eternity, again and again without ever knowing it. The horizon problem. Look at the night sky. Wherever you point a telescope, whether you look to the left, right, up, or down, the universe looks incredibly even. Same temperature, same large-scale structure, same faint glow from the early universe, called the cosmic microwave background, spread almost perfectly across the sky. But here's the weird part. Those regions of space are so far apart, they never had time to talk to each other. Light and information travels at a finite speed. And in the early moments of the universe, there simply wasn't enough time for distant parts of the cosmos to exchange heat, energy, or anything else. They should be wildly different, patchy, chaotic. But they're not. They're weirdly uniform, as if they somehow coordinated with each other instantly. That's the horizon problem. It asks, how did different regions of the universe end up so perfectly balanced when they were never in contact? It's like finding two strangers on opposite sides of the planet who somehow picked out matching outfits without ever meeting or talking. To explain this, scientists came up with the idea of cosmic inflation, a brief moment right after the Big Bang when the universe expanded faster than the speed of light. In that scenario, everything was close together once, shared the same temperature, then got stretched apart rapidly, preserving that uniformity. Maybe inflation happened. Maybe it didn't. But the horizon problem forces a deeper realization. Even the vastness of space, even the emptiness between galaxies, carries the fingerprints of a mystery we don't fully understand. And when you look into the smoothness of the sky, you're looking into one of the biggest cosmic secrets still left unsolved. Negativity bias paradox. Imagine this. You get 10 compliments in one day. People tell you you're smart, funny, kind, inspiring. Feels good, right? But then, one person criticizes you. Maybe it's petty. Maybe it's unfair. And somehow, that one negative comment sticks harder in your mind than all the praise combined. You replay it. You obsess over it. You doubt yourself because of it. That's negativity bias. And the paradox is, even though good and bad experiences both happen, bad ones have a much stronger impact on your thoughts, your emotions, and your behavior. You'd think a good thing would cancel out a bad thing. 10 good things should crush one bad thing easily. But it doesn't work that way. Studies show you remember insults longer than compliments. You react more strongly to losing money than gaining it. You feel more pain from a betrayal than pleasure from loyalty. Why? Evolution. In the wild, noticing danger was critical for survival. Missing one threat could get you killed. Meanwhile, missing a reward, well, you could always try again later, so your brain evolved to treat negative events as bigger, louder, more urgent. Today, you still carry that survival wiring, but now it shows up in overthinking small mistakes, letting one bad day ruin a good week, giving more emotional weight to criticism than encouragement. The negativity bias paradox teaches a brutal truth. Your mind isn't designed for happiness. It's designed for survival. And if you don't consciously push back, you'll always notice what hurts, the louder than what heals. The flatness problem. Imagine the universe as a giant three-dimensional sheet, not curved like a ball, not warped like a saddle. Flat. Flatness, in cosmic terms, means that parallel lines stay parallel. The geometry of space follows simple, familiar rules. Light travels in straight paths without bending weirdly. Now here's the problem. If the universe were even slightly curved at the beginning, even by a tiny amount, that curve would have gotten bigger over time. Like trying to stack coins. If you're just a millimeter off at the bottom, you're way off at the top in a curved universe. If space were positively curved like a sphere, it should have collapsed back on itself by now. If it were negatively curved like a saddle, it should have expanded wildly and become super chaotic. But it didn't. It barren after 13.8 billion years, space is still almost perfectly flat, within a fraction of a percent. That's the flatness problem. It asks, why was the early universe so precisely tuned that even after all this time, space hasn't tipped or twisted into chaos? It's not what randomness would predict. It's not what you'd expect if things just unfolded naturally without some kind of special condition at the start. Scientists again use cosmic inflation to explain this. Maybe a tiny patch of flat space expanded so massively fast that the whole universe smoothed out like a stretched rubber sheet. But without inflation, flatness seems too perfect to happen by chance. The flatness problem leaves you with a strange feeling. The universe isn't just big, it's suspiciously well-behaved, balanced on a cosmic knife's edge when it had every reason to fall. Wheeler's delayed choice. Imagine you're at a lab, about to run a classic physics experiment, the double-slit experiment. Here's the basic setup. You fire a particle, like a photon, at a wall with two slits. If you don't observe it carefully, the particle acts like a wave, going through both slits at once and creating an interference pattern. But if you observe it closely, the particle acts like a solid little dot, choosing one slit or the other. Your observation decides the outcome. Weird enough already, right? But here's where things get insane. In Wheeler's delayed choice experiment, you don't decide whether to measure the particle until after it's already passed through the slits. In theory, the particle should have already gone through one slit or both by the time you decide. But your later choice still seems to determine whether the particle behaved like a wave or a particle earlier. Your decision in the present appears to change the particle's behavior in the past, like you're reaching backwards in time and rewriting history based on something you hadn't even decided yet. This isn't magic, this is real experimental physics. Now, scientists debate whether it's truly changing the past or whether quantum reality just doesn't have definite facts until observations are made. Either way, the delayed choice experiment shatters any comfortable idea you had about time being one way, clean, and settled. Because it suggests reality isn't just sitting there waiting to be discovered. Reality might be shaped, even in the past, by the choices you make right now. And if that's true, what else about your world is still undecided until you look at it? Tegmark's mathematical universe. You've probably heard people say physics is the language of the universe, or math explains how the world works. But physicist Max Tegmark takes it one step further. What if the universe doesn't just follow mathematical laws? What if the universe itself is a mathematical structure? Not a thing that math happens to describe. Not a stage where math plays out. Reality, everything you see, touch, feel, remember, might literally be made of math. According to Tegmark's mathematical universe hypothesis, the deepest level of existence isn't particles or energy or even space-time. It's pure mathematical relationships, formulas, patterns, structures, and what we experience as physical, atoms, stars, rivers, dreams, is just the inside view of these underlying equations playing out. In this view, electrons don't just behave mathematically, they are mathematical structures. The shape of space isn't drawn by math, it is math. Your thoughts, your memories, your sense of being alive, all math at the most fundamental level. It sounds insane, but it answers a lot of deep questions. Why is the universe so precisely structured? Why are mathematical predictions, from Einstein's relativity to quantum mechanics, so freakishly accurate? Why do abstract equations we invent end up describing real phenomena? Maybe because we aren't inventing them. Maybe we're just slowly uncovering the truth that reality was math all along. The mathematical universe idea forces a final uncomfortable question. If you are made of math, what happens to you? When the equation shifts, and if existence is just patterns flowing through logic, then what does it even mean to be real? The invisible gorilla. You're shown a video of two teams, one in white shirts, one in black shirts, passing basketballs back and forth. You're given a simple task: count how many passes the white team makes. You focus hard, eyes glued to the players, counting carefully. Then the video ends. And the researchers ask, "Did you see the gorilla?" "Wait, what?" You rewind the video. And sure enough, halfway through, a person in a full gorilla suit walks into the middle of the scene, pounds their chest, and strolls off, right there, plain as day. And somehow, you never saw it. That's the invisible gorilla experiment, created by psychologists Daniel Simons and Christopher Chabris. It proves something shocking. Attention is not the same as awareness. You can be laser-focused on one task, counting passes, solving a problem, checking your phone, and still completely miss gigantic, obvious things happening right in front of you. Your brain edits reality based on what it thinks you need to see. Anything that doesn't fit that focus gets deleted before you even realize it was there. The invisible gorilla shows a brutal truth. You don't see everything around you. You see what you expect to see. And sometimes that means missing the most obvious things. The bystander effect. Imagine you're walking down a busy street. You see someone collapse on the sidewalk. Out. Dozens of people around. You expect, you hope, someone will rush to help. But instead, nothing happens. People glance over. People keep walking. People assume someone else will do something. That's the bystander effect. First studied after the tragic murder of Kitty Genovese in 1964, it shows something brutal. The more witnesses there are, the less responsible any one person feels. Everyone thinks, someone else probably already called for help. Someone else must know better what to do. Maybe it's not really an emergency. So everyone waits. And as more people gather, the situation somehow becomes less urgent in everyone's mind, even as the need for action grows. It's not about cruelty. It's not about evil. It's about how human brains offload responsibility when they feel like part of a crowd. You lose the sharp feeling of "I must act." And in that tiny gap, real people suffer. The bystander effect forces a painful realization. When everyone assumes someone else will step up, no one does. And sometimes, the most heroic thing you can do isn't extraordinary. It's just being the first one to move. Friendship paradox. Picture your group of friends. Now ask yourself, are they more popular than you? Statistically speaking, yes. But don't worry. It's not because you're boring or bad at making friends. It's because of pure math. Here's how it works. Popular people, the ones with lots of friends, show up in more people's social circles. If someone has 100 friends, they're going to appear in way more networks than someone with just 3 friends. Which means, when you pick a random person from your network, there's a higher chance that person is a super connector, someone who skews the average upward. So when you casually look around at your friends, they seem on average to have more connections. Go to more parties, be more in the loop, even if you're doing fine. It's a math illusion, not a failure. This isn't just about friendships. The same pattern shows up in university class sizes. Your classes feel bigger than the school average. Income comparisons. Your peers seem richer than the average. Followers on social media. Your mutuals look more famous than you. Because highly connected, highly visible people show up more often when you sample the world. The friendship paradox teaches something strangely comforting. You're not secretly less loved. You're just seeing the world through a lens that naturally tilts toward the loudest, biggest, most visible people. And once you understand that, you stop measuring your life by a tilted ruler. Choice blindness. You're shown 2 photos of people. You're asked to pick which one you find more attractive. You point at one. Easy. Then the researcher hands you the photo you supposedly picked and asks why you chose it. You start explaining they have a nice smile. Their face feels more welcoming. They seem more natural. Perfectly normal. Except the researcher secretly swapped the photos. You're now holding the other person, the one you didn't pick, and you don't notice. You just calmly invent a reason for a choice you never actually made. That's choice blindness, a phenomenon uncovered by cognitive scientists. It shows you don't just make choices. Sometimes you make up stories afterward to justify choices you didn't even realize were changed. Your brain smooths over the gap. It fills in the blanks. It patches reality without you noticing. And it's not just about faces. Choice blindness happens in product preferences, political opinions, moral decisions. You make a choice. Then, even if the choice shifts, your mind generates a perfectly confident explanation. And here's the uncomfortable part. You believe it. The choice blindness paradox reveals something chilling. You're not always the careful, conscious decision-maker you think you are. Sometimes, you're just the narrator, telling the story after the plot's already been written. Empathy gap. You're calm right now, maybe even a little bored. So you think if someone insults me, I'll just shrug it off. If something bad happens, I'll stay rational. Sounds reasonable, right? But when the moment actually hits, when you're angry, scared, hungry, in pain, everything changes. Suddenly emotions take over. You act impulsively. You make decisions you swore you'd never make. That's the empathy gap. It's the mental blind spot where calm you can't imagine being emotional. Emotional you can't remember how calm feels. You don't just misunderstand others. You misunderstand your future self. When you're full, you underestimate how strong hunger feels. When you're rested, you underestimate how bad exhaustion warps your thinking. When you're in love, you can't imagine falling out of it. And the reverse is true too. The empathy gap shows up everywhere. In politics, when leaders can't grasp the desperation of people suffering. In law, when punishments assume criminals acted with cool rationality. In daily life, when you make promises or judgments you can't keep once your emotional state flips. It's not because people are stupid or cruel. It's because your brain struggles to simulate a different you. You don't just predict the future wrong. You predict yourself wrong. And that creates a hidden trap. You can plan perfectly for the world you feel right now and be completely unprepared for the world you're about to feel next. Ostrich effect. Imagine you have an investment. You know the stock market's been rough lately, but instead of checking how your money is doing, you just don't look. You avoid opening the app. You avoid reading the news. You avoid thinking about it altogether. Because deep down, you believe, if I don't see the bad news, maybe it won't feel real. That's the ostrich effect, named after the myth that ostriches bury their heads in the sand when scared, which for the record they don't actually do, but we humans definitely do mentally. It's the instinct to avoid information you suspect will be unpleasant. I'll find it hiding in situations like not checking your grades after a hard exam, ignoring health symptoms instead of going to the doctor, putting off financial problems because facing them is scary. In each case, avoiding the news feels safer. Less anxiety, at least for a moment. But here's the paradox. The more you avoid, the worse the situation usually gets. Problems grow while you're not looking. Small issues become emergencies. Tiny cracks turn into full collapses. Facing bad news early often gives you options, time to act, time to adapt, time to recover. But the ostrich effect tricks your brain into thinking that silence equals safety. The truth is harsher. Turning away from danger doesn't make it go away. It just blinds you to the moment you could have changed the ending. Naive realism paradox. You wake up every morning and trust your senses. The sky looks blue. It must be blue. Someone seems rude. They must be rude. You believe what you see, hear, feel, and experience, naturally, automatically. But here's the catch. You don't experience the world directly. You experience your brain's version of it. And that version is filtered, edited, colored by your memories, emotions, expectations, biases. You don't see the raw truth. You see an interpretation of it. But, and here's the real kicker, you still feel like you're seeing reality exactly as it is. That's the naive realism paradox. It's the belief that I see the world objectively. If other people see it differently, they must be wrong, irrational, or biased. You assume you're the camera, neutral, accurate, truthful, and anyone who disagrees must be mistaken. This isn't about arrogance. It's how human brains are wired. You don't feel your perceptions bending. You don't notice your emotions tinting your judgments. You just feel right, and it causes massive problems. Political polarization, social conflicts, broken relationships, inability to compromise. Because when you believe you're seeing pure truth, there's no reason to listen, no reason to doubt, no reason to question your own perspective. You don't realize you and the person you disagree with aren't even looking at the same reality anymore. The naive realism paradox forces one final uncomfortable realization. The hardest illusion to break is the one that makes you think you're not under any illusions at all.